Welcome, everyone, to the 8th episode of the Friday Nightmares podcast. I am one half of your hosting team. My name is Heather Powell, and I am coming to you today from Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. And with me, as always,
is Scott Crawford coming to you from Swartz Creek, Michigan, where it's actually pretty dang nice out finally.
And you can have groups of 10 now.
Yes, the state is slowly starting to reopen. Slowly, but it's getting there.
It's exciting time because this week our groups are still at 5 unless it's been raised today. I haven't checked the provincial announcement yet. But we've been able to open retail stores with storefronts today, and you've been able to go in them.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so it's working there. And it's so cute. Canada's so different than the States, where they're like, wear a mask. Like our prime minister's like, please wear a mask. I would really like it if you considered one day wearing a mask. That would be just really, really nice if you did that. It's such a different fucking tone.
You Canadians are just so polite.
It's so like, if you want to, we would really like that. Because I haven't worn a mask when I go out. Now, mind you, I don't go out many places.
Right.
I haven't stepped foot in a store. I think last week I went to a grocery store to pick up pancake mix, and that was the first time I had been in a store in 2 weeks. So there's a lot of doing that whole grocery gateway, which is for us, it's delivery of groceries, and the LCBO, which is our liquor store. We all know I like to go to the LCBO.
And you got to at least bring it up at least one episode.
I know. I always have to talk about my drinking at least on one episode. That's okay. That's how I roll. It is what it is. But I don't go out much, so I don't feel the need to wear a mask. But if it became mandatory, I would wear one, if it was required.
Right. Yeah, because for right now, I think it's by store mandate here. So, if a certain store says you must have a mask on before you enter, they will not serve you. They're allowed to not serve you or anything like that. So the gas station right down the road from me, every morning that I go to before I go to work, they have a mandatory wear a mask before you come in. And apparently someone tried this before, but there's even a sign on the door and goes, no, using your shirt over your face is not allowed. So apparently someone tried doing that. So
that is so me. I'm not someone that would try doing that. I feel like they made that sign, even though I'm not in Michigan right now, because someone like me tried to do that. Yeah. I don't like rules at all.
Yeah, I can understand these rules, but even I can't stand wearing the mask, but I do it.
Yeah, of course. And as for, I understand the big picture of it. I'm not criticizing, but I totally be that person that would forget the mask, show up at the gas station and be like, oh, I'm just going to put my shirt over top of my mouth. But, for the longest time in Canada, I don't know, you guys don't do this here, but you could pump gas before paying. So you pump your gas and then go in and pay for it. And we've switched to the American model. And my only thought is that we have more people from Michigan, Swartz Creek coming up to Canada and stealing gas.
From Michigan and Swartz Creek?
Yes, specifically Swartz Creek. I feel like that's what's happening.
Fair enough.
Just kidding, obviously. But no, we switched that model. We had people stealing gas. Obviously, they were not Americans. They were, your average Canadian just looking to steal some gas. But yeah,
save an extra buck.
Save an extra buck, right? But yeah, things are definitely beginning to get a little bit more humanized, which is nice.
Yeah.
And yeah, we'll see where things go. But yeah, it's exciting. It's exciting times. The weather's getting better. Happy Memorial Day weekend to my American brothers and sisters. Happy Memorial Day to you, Scott.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, got let out of work a half day early, which is not normal for this job, but I think it's because of the fact that we're essential workers and the people that are there are still, going in every single day. So I think it's their way our company's just saying thank you. We're getting paid for the half day. We're getting paid for the full day, but only working half the day. And then, we're getting paid for Memorial Day too. So that's nice.
Well, yeah, I think it's just expected here. We get our staffs paid for it, generally speaking. So I always find it funny when you're like, oh yeah, we get our staff paid for it. And I'm like, yeah, shouldn't you get your stats paid for? It's an interesting change, but yeah. So happy Memorial Day or past Memorial Day, because this will come out past Memorial Day, but I hope all my American friends are doing well and all that kind of good jazz.
Yeah, and you can definitely tell it's Memorial Day weekend here in Michigan, because the entire I-75, our expressway going north, was completely bumper to bumper my whole way home because they are trying to go all the way up to the UP for their up north vacation.
Yeah, right? Well, and the UP's a long drive. I'm surprised they want to go out there just for a weekend. That would not be something that I would
Well,
want to do.
it's
But
only about a 3-hour drive to get across the bridge. It's where I went was a lot further, the story that I told you. But so you can get to a destination within like about 4 hours
that
easily.
still sounds like a really long time for a weekend.
Well, I mean, you've kind of did it for coming to visit me.
Yeah, but there's a reason why the border's closed now, because I will never be doing that again. Now that we can go it
Oh,
online, we have no reason. Actually, who
that's
knows where I'll be in the States again. Our borders are closed at least till June 21st, so we'll see.
yeah. I'll say here's still fingers crossed for Fozzie in July at the end of July, but that's getting less and less likely at this moment. But
Yeah.
fingers crossed.
Yeah, we'll see what happens, right? Anyway, I think we bullshitted enough. This is a lot of bullshitting that we usually don't go this far into it. So we should
That's
jump
true.
into our topic at hand. So as always, we like to discuss the new 2020 movies that we are watching, and then we'll get into our podcast, and then we'll get into our topic. So I do want to state what our topic is up front. Our topic is about sexualities in films, and we're going to be specifically looking at sexual assault in horror films, the progression of it since the 70s, 80s, 90s, and where we see it going today. And I think I haven't told this part to Scott, but we probably will include some websites about, if you've been a victim of sexual assault and stuff, because I am very well aware of the fact that this topic could trigger somebody. And, obviously I would want those resources there just in case someone is triggered.
Oh, absolutely.
And I also want to just take a quick second to acknowledge all of the male podcasters in the Horophilia and Legion Network. As a female who is still very new to this podcasting community, I have nothing but respect for how every single male has talked about rape revenge films, their opinions that have been reflected on it. I think they have handled the topic with a huge amount of maturity, respect, and dignity. All I wanted to do with this topic that was different was come at it from a female perspective. That was the only difference I wanted to bring, but I really wanted to acknowledge and thank every single male podcaster on the Horophilia Network, on the Legion Network, and some independents like Horror for Dummies, Horror Returns, particularly the ones that I've listened to that have even gone into this topic. Every single one of them has handled this topic with so much respect and dignity and compassion, and that really sums up the character of the podcasters that we have in these communities, and we're really lucky to have them.
Yeah, I completely agree.
So anyway, I just wanted to say that up front. So we'll be talking about that, and then we'll be moving into our newest segment, which is Into the Dark.
Sounds good. So
why don't you start with the first movie? Since I'm hosting, Scott, why don't you talk about this awesome movie that we watched?
Oh, yeah, okay. So our first movie that you and I watched, I think we just watched this last Sunday, was In the Trap. Now I've been hearing good things about this through a couple people in the podcasting community, so I figured this would be a fun one to check out. And yeah, I was not really a fan of this one. It became way too predictable, but it's pretty much about a guy that isolates himself in his apartment and like deals with personal issues and more religious aspects.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the whole religious tone of this was like in your face. And some of these films, like, I can get behind, but this one, I don't know. It just didn't work for me. It felt like every other type of film like this that I've seen. And then when the quote unquote twist happens at the end, that once again Heather called.
Yeah.
Was
so smart.
You so smart. But that I am so sick of that type of twist.
Yeah, it's so, and I didn't even understand the ending. Like not to give too, we won't give spoilers, but the ending to me, I was like, what? Really? So nothing else made, like, it just, the acting was decent enough. I don't think it was a super high budget movie, so I think they used their money well, but I didn't overly enjoy it at all. It was just there. It was fine. I think we paid for it.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, and that's, would I pay for it or recommend people paying for it? No. Unless you're getting it for like $1.99. But yeah, it was all right. If you need to like buff up your 2020 list, maybe, but I think there's other better 2020 movies to watch.
Yep. Well, like from the few podcasters that have really liked it, I would say like it would probably be worth the rental if you're into like the exorcism religious type films, because you may find something more enjoyable that you or I did not get from it.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
But yeah, it was just okay.
So our next movie is Scare Me. So Scott suggested this movie. So Scott and I have our weekly Sunday nights where we watch 2020 movies, and Scott is very good at researching to find out new 2020 movies that come out. And he was like, oh, one of the podcasters that we know spoke about this, and we should check it out. I've heard it's pretty decent. So he watched it for free. I had to pay for it, which is fine. That sometimes happens with him and I, with me being in Canada and him being in the United States. It was definitely a entry filmmaker film.
Yeah, this was like really low budget.
But it was not the worst movie I have ever seen. When it first started, it starts off pretty cheese.
Yeah, it started off almost like a porno.
Or it started off like Scott and I got a camcorder and we decided to get our friends together and make a movie.
Yeah, and like as soon as it started, I pretty much sent Heather a message going, I'm so sorry I suggested this, because it just like, if this is how this film's going to be, we are in trouble.
I shamed him a bit because that's the relationship we have. But, it's an anthology. And the stories weren't that bad. I feel like what they did was the wraparound was low budget, but the stories, they actually used their money wisely.
Yeah.
And they put good effort in.
Yep, I completely agree, because, the wraparound was very cringy, especially the first half of it. Like, the later half, it got more interesting and was more enjoyable, but man, for that first half, I thought we were really in trouble. And then when that first story hit, like, it really pulled us both in. And I think there's like 3 or 4 stories besides the wraparound. And each story was pretty good on its own. And then like the wraparound itself kind of picked up its pace a little bit towards the end, which definitely helped it for me.
I would say, and there was one gentleman in there whose acting stood out to me, who I think has potential. The rest of them, I think that's great that they got some experience and maybe they'll get better. But there was one guy in particular that I was like, you got some talent. I could see you going forward.
Yep.
Yet again, know your expectations. I think if you go into this knowing that it is a low budget, definitely somebody's like first kick at the can with filming, you will be not disappointed. The mini stories are great for what they are. The acting in them is decent. There's one really good one that I liked that I was kind of political, and I thought that it was really well done.
That one was really good.
I know I like politics now. It's not over politicky, but it definitely ties into Black Lives Matters. Definitely. I was really, really happy with that.
Yeah, there is one stipulation that we should say. Apparently, there are 2 movies out this year called Scare Me. And this is where we weren't sure which one the person that we were talking to suggested. So for anybody that's interested in the one that we're talking about, it has like a purplish pink neon cover with a skull with glasses.
The glasses are cool too. The glasses are, actually instrumental throughout the film. And yet again, for go in this knowing your expectations. It's low budget. Think of it like a student film, like somebody getting their first kick at the can, and I think you won't be disappointed. I'm happy I paid for it because I feel like these guys put a real effort forward, and I'm happy to support that.
Yeah, same. That like I said, I was a little bit worried in the beginning, but then once it started going, though, I was perfectly fine with it. It was worth the rental, and it had some good elements to it. And like you said, this is a good way to watch to learn how to do a independent film.
Absolutely, and I had no problem supporting these guys. Like, if I had to choose between this and Wakefield Project, this was much better. Like, night and day better. Yeah. And I think Wakefield had more money than Scare Me did, And I just think Scare Me just used their budget better. They just knew how to use the money where it counted.
Yep, they definitely did. Yeah, and the next movie you and I ended up watching, this one we watched this last Sunday as well, was Bit.
And we fought about this movie.
We kind of did, actually.
And we didn't kind of did. We fought about this movie.
Yeah, so if you hear this, Nudie, there's one that I don't agree on.
I'll let you talk about it, though, Scott, and then I'll chime in.
All right, so pretty much this was about as far as I could tell, a all-female version of Lost Boys.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it.
Yeah, and it was definitely a bit lower budget. I wouldn't say like super low budget, but like you could just tell just by the way it looked that there was like, wasn't a lot of money invested into this. But yeah, all around, like at first, like it grew on me, but at first it felt like just kind of a generic vampire story that I've seen a million times. But then as Heather and I were arguing and discussing back and forth at the same time, like she brought up some points that made more sense to me. And like she even said, okay, what is it that you do not like about this? And I'm like, okay, it's kind of hard. Like I think what it was is just this one just didn't connect with me nearly as much as it did with you. There was and I can't say there was anything actually wrong with the film.
And I think, Tammy talked about this on the Rotten Round Table. And actually, I think she brought it up with you on that episode. And she said females may like this more. Yeah. Because it is very female-centric. It is based within the LGBTQ. Thank you, community. And to me, it's the same quality of a Hulu Into the Dark. If you like all of the Hulus Into the Dark ones, and I've only seen a couple, and I liked both. Like I liked After Midnight, and I liked Valentine. I thought that they were fun, fluffy, easy to watch. This to me could be a Hulu Into the Dark.
Yeah, and that is pretty much right when you said that is when it like, this makes a lot more sense now to me.
I would never put this in top 10 for me. It would not fall there because I don't think that it is that overly well done, but I thought the young ladies did a good job. I thought it was interesting that they came to it from a different perspective. I thought the effects were very Hulu. Like it was very Hulu effects. Like I kind of felt like I was just watching Valentine again, only slightly different, with vampires and stuff. And that's okay. I definitely think it's worth the rental. I paid, how much did we pay for it?
I'll say I'm not sure what you paid for it, but I ended up paying $7 for it.
Yeah, I think I paid $7 as well. I have no regrets.
I did it first, but then as we were talking, I was like, okay, like this is fine. It was worth the rental.
Yeah, I think that definitely I would say rent it if you really like the Hulu Into the Darks, all of them.
Yeah.
If you're like, I only like one or two, it may not be something that you want to watch. But if you were like me and you thought the Hulu Into the Darks that you've seen are fun or fluffy, easy watches, and you want something that's an easy, fluffy, fun watch, go for it.
Yep, exactly. That is a great way of just saying it.
So the next one is Swallow, and I swear to you, Scott, I read this and all I could think was swallow, follow, worry about, and like start singing.
Sing with my love.
Right? God, you can tell what year we were born.
Yeah.
Great movie. Now, is it horror? ? What do you think, Scott?
Yeah, this one was this could have totally fit in our is it horror category, like if we had seen it like back then when we did our first episode. Because this one is a tough one that could be debated over and over again. But I think it is. It's on that border, and it leans a little more on the horror side. But I can't really get into too much detail without like spoilers. But I think it's partly to do with the relationship. Mm-hmm. That's kind of where I see the horror in it, and like.
Yeah, it's a theory about female oppression, right? It's about female oppression and this individual trying to take control of her life where she can, and some of the things she does are horrific. So I would completely understand if someone said to me, I don't consider this a horror film.
Yeah. I
wouldn't argue with them. I saw it as a horror film simply because it had themes that speak the Heather language. Oppression, societal norms, doing something to disrupt societal norms, but in turn creates harm to yourself. It's well acted. It's slow, but it's not slow.
Yeah.
So you got to really like character development. You really got to really like plot development in order to enjoy it, and very realism horror. Like, this isn't like your fantasy horror. The more I watch different films, the more I'm beginning to learn that there's horror that is based in reality and horror that is reality on steroids.
Yes.
And this is very much a horror based in reality. There could be, and there probably are people that do this.
Yep, exactly.
And why they do it is probably very similar. So that would be probably how I would frame it to people if I thought, if you liked Vivarium, you may like Swallow. I think people who like that will probably like Swallow.
Yeah, that is a very excellent comparison, because especially for the people that also the people that think Vivarium would be considered horror would probably also consider Swallow horror.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
Yeah, I highly recommend this movie. It's really high up on my list. I can't remember if it's in my top 10. I don't think it is, but it's like still way up there. And
it's in my top 10, and yet again, I think that has to do with me being a female.
Right.
I really do. And also when I watch this, not to give too many spoilers away, it really reflected my marriage, which was not healthy towards the end of it. And I really could understand what the pressures that the female character was feeling. So yet again, that personal connection to it is probably what made it more horror for me, because I was seeing my life enacted on film. Minus, I didn't swallow things like tax and stuff, and I'm not giving too much away there because it's pretty clear if you even read a brief synopsis that that's what happens.
Right.
I did not do that. But there were other things in that film that really spoke to me.
Yep, and I can see that. And I just looked, and it's my number 11 right now.
So that's pretty high. It's like how After Midnight was high for me as well, only for you it was higher.
Yep, exactly, because of the personal level connection.
Exactly. Yeah.
And yeah, I think the next two are ones that you've seen, and I have not.
Oh, yeah. So Monstrum is a movie that is currently streaming on Shudder, and I believe on Canadian and American Shudder.
Yep.
Which is, always magical. So very, very good film. It is a Korean film. I believe it's Korean.
Yes, South Korean, I think.
South Korean film. Yeah, probably not from North Korea.
Right.
Right? South Korean film. It is in subtitles. It's a creature feature. Fresh cuts. Recently, Mike Venom and Don and Ellie did a phenomenal job of covering this movie. I think if you enjoy creature features and you like the whole, quite literally a monster story, it's a really good movie. It's fast paced. There's some excellent action scenes in it. Yeah, there's some cheesy CGI, but that doesn't take me out of a movie. I don't care.
Right.
I can watch some pretty crappy CGI films and still have a good time with them. I don't think it's at all, detrimental to the film. I would say if you like creature features, you don't mind subtitles, you got some time on your hands, it's on Shudder. It's currently not in my top 10, but just above my top 10. So I think 11 or 12, it's high up. I really enjoyed it.
Has me really excited, because that means it may be in my top 10, because when I watch it, because this already is the monster creature feature type South Korean film. I'm a big fan of their films, but it also has another level to it that I really enjoy, and that's the period piece of the 1500s and stuff like that. So I'm this might be high on my list. I have this feeling it probably will be.
Yeah, and I could see why it would be for anybody. It's a really good film, and it's great that it's on Shudder and that it's streaming. And I want to just go back to Swallow for a second. That is available on iTunes in Canada. It's not available anywhere else right now. Yep. So if you are interested, you need to get it on iTunes.
Yep, and for the US, it's on Amazon to rent.
So, but yeah, I definitely recommend Monstrum, and I think, Scott, you will dig it. I think you'll dig it more than me, and it's just because I think it's more up your alley, but it is a really well done film.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to checking it out, and I'm hoping by this weekend I will, so I can get back to you on it next week or next episode.
So when Scott and I also talk about our top 10, Scott and I have watched 56, I watched 56 2020 watches.
Yeah, but I'm at 54.
Yeah, so like we've seen a lot of movies, right? So it's something, if we say something's not in our top 10, we're not trying to say it's a bad film. We're just saying it didn't resonate with us the most. By no stance, because it's not, like if it's in our top 20, I would say it's solid.
Yeah, and I was gonna say if it's not in our top 10, that like and it's like still high up there, the way I look at it, it just means there's a lot of competition with the films we've already seen.
Yes, and we've noticed like we're going to actually get a little bit more selective in our watches now,
Yeah.
especially if we have to pay for them. Not if they're free, but if we have to pay for them. If they're on Netflix or Shudder or whatever, then that's not as bad, or Prime. Though Prime in Canada sucks. We don't get anything fresh.
Well, Prime in the U.S. isn't much better. Like we get a lot of like someone made something in their kitchen and was able to upload it onto Amazon type films. So
oh man, yeah. Like I used to think Prime was going to be sick, and then I would turn on some videos and I'm like, did someone film this with their iPhone?
Yep.
Right? Like, and a shitty iPhone too, like an iPhone that's like 5 iPhones ago.
Right.
Anyway, the final one that I want to talk about is Get In, also known as Free. And it's 2019. It came out in France. It just dropped on Netflix Canada and Netflix America recently. I just watched that this morning, and OMG. It went all the way from number 56 to number 1 on my list.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it hopscotched over everything else. I was so enthralled in this movie that I couldn't look away. And if I did, I would rewind the movie to see what I missed.
Oh, wow.
And Scott knows how much I don't like doing that.
Yeah.
So it's the basis premise of this is a couple goes away on vacation. They let their nanny and her husband stay in the house for the summer that they own because the nanny and the husband have been evicted. They come back, and the nanny and the husband won't let them back into their house. And this is a private residence. It's a gated residence. And they basically they start off with going through these legal battles to get their house back, and then obviously things take a turn from there. And there is some very interesting characters that are in it. There is some hardcore violence that occurs in it. Lots a graphic nudity is in it. I as Scott kindly corrected me earlier, with the exception of Jessica Forever, I have yet to see a French film that I have not enjoyed. And I just feel like the French and Spanish seem to really hit it out of the park.
Mm-hmm.
They just platform blew me away. Therapy blew me away. Blind Son was an excellent film. I can't remember the other one now, but the one with the 3 boys.
Among the Living.
Among the Living. Like, excellent films. This one is no exception. It will stay in my top 10. Whether it stays number 1 or not, it will all depend what comes out in the next couple of months. But on Netflix, it is amazing, and I highly, highly recommend checking it out.
Yeah, and this is one that I remember briefly hearing about by someone, I forget who, and then you talking about it today, and with you saying it's your number 1, yeah, this has got to be watched really soon for me because I am very curious.
And to make it easier on Netflix, if you go to Netflix and you click on latest, you can get all of the newest films, so comedies or anything like that that has been released. Makes it a little bit easier to identify those horror films that you may be trying to find. Because Shudder's really good with, like, you go to Shudder and you go to movies, it's usually like whatever's new is top category. Netflix, you kind of have to dig a little bit. I'm currently watching a Hindi film. It's okay, but you really gotta like Bollywood. It's like a lot. Very Bollywoody. But definitely with this other one, like if I could find it on DVD, I would own it. That's how much, and I don't buy physical media.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and that's saying something because you don't buy physical media at all.
At all. I have zero interest in doing that, but I will be heartbroken if I can't find a way to buy this movie and have it again.
Yeah, because I
That
think
is how much I like it.
the only other movie I've heard you say that about was Live Scream.
Live Scream, Mother of Monsters. I think anything in my top 10 I would have as physical media.
Yeah, that's pretty good reason to be in top 10.
Right?
And yeah, that Hindi one, is that a 2021 or is that just?
It's a 2020.
Oh, nice.
It's called Psycho. And it's okay. It's long though. It's 2.5 hours.
Oh boy.
So I'm gonna see if it gets to like if they start dancing and stuff in it. I don't know if I'll be able to like handle that. My ex-husband was South Asian, so I've seen a fair amount of Bollywood films with my ex-in-laws. So yeah, we'll see where it goes from here.
Right. Makes sense. So yeah, I guess that'll be the end of the 2020 list, and we can jump into the older films. Like up top is a lot of the ones that you watched, so I'll go down to a couple because it doesn't look like I watched nearly as many older films as you have.
Yeah, you haven't watched that many movies.
Surprisingly, yeah, like work has just been a little bit more busy, and then I got distracted a couple days by watching YouTube videos instead, just because I wanted to switch it up.
Fair enough.
But yeah, I guess the first one I want to bring up, Pontypool from 2008. Man, I have been told to watch this movie multiple times by multiple different friends of mine and podcasters, and I've heard another couple Cinema Psyops. I'll give a shout out there. Court Psyops and Matt Psyop covered Pontypool, and that was what really sold me on wanting to see this film. And when I seen it was playing on Amazon Prime, I knew I had to like watch it. And what a freaking amazing movie! Like, it's low budget, so it's like a small cast, all in Canada.
Oh, yeah. That's what you were telling me about.
Yeah, in the town of Pontypool. And what a very unique take on the zombie genre. Like, this is probably the most unique zombie film I've seen in a very, very long time. Especially the way people are infected. Like, it's 12 years old, so I can get into it a little bit, but pretty much the English language is certain words in the English language will infect you. And it's very weird, but very unique. And it deals with these people that work in a radio broadcast station, and they're doing like their morning radio show, and they're hearing about the incidents that's happening outside the world, and it's pretty much it's just what's going on inside the radio station. Like, you don't see the outside world or what's going on out there. So very like
that sounds really cool.
Yeah, it's like low budget, but like once again, they use their budget perfectly.
That's amazing.
And it is creepy. And yeah, like I say, it's a very well done movie. Like this is a 10 out of 10 film for me. And you know, I don't give out 10 out of 10s lightly. And this one, I was just like, yep, I have nothing wrong with this film. It is just awesome, and I would own this.
That's amazing. You know, you made me want to go back and start talking about Get In again. God, I love that movie. I mean, he's a 10 out of 10. I'm like, that movie too is a 10 out of 10 for me. Like, I want to go back in time and just continue to talk about this movie because I loved it so much.
And that's kind of how I am with Pontypool. So that means right? I watch Get In, so you and I can discuss it like crazy, and then you watch Pontypool, and then you and I can discuss it.
It's a Canadian movie. You know, exactly. Like if I don't, my citizenship's going to be revoked.
Right, exactly. You have to do this.
But yeah, that sounds really awesome. It sounds like it. I love when, you know, you can be low budget and use your money well. And you know, you knock it out of the park, and it's awesome.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, like this is better than a lot of the big budget films that I've seen.
You know, like movies like The Turning. Like, what a waste of money.
Yeah.
What an absolute, or The Grudge. What a waste. You know, if some of these movies that don't have the budget but were so much better had that budget, think about what they could have done.
Oh, absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like
especially if you had the right script writers for it and everything. Like if you had everything perfectly, like these indie, like some of these really good indie films do. Like, I would love to see.
And just the money.
Yeah.
Like, all they need is some money, right? But.
Well, and there's one thing I want to bring up too, like with the indie and big budget. I see an issue that always happens with these big budget films where when they have all these millions of dollars to spend, certain filmmakers lose their creativeness. because when you are working with a much smaller budget, you are forced to get creative to
Yeah,
make
that's a
your
good
budget
point.
meet. So I feel like a lot of big budget films lose that because they just have all the money in the world to spend on it.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point there. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So I guess we'll keep kind of around that same year. I'll talk about The Collector.
Nice.
First time watch for me. Heard a lot about it. Seen the cover art for years. Never got around to watching it. Like, talk about a movie where the villain becomes or the antagonist becomes the protagonist.
Yeah.
Right, and then it's a gore fest. Oh my goodness, and not a happy ending at all.
No.
So really enjoyed it. Really well done. I haven't watched The Collection. I think it is. Is a sequel.
Yeah,
So
I think you would like that one even more.
So I'm going to watch that one eventually too. But yeah, I would say if you skipped over this movie and you like Saw or you like any kind of, I don't want to say torture porn because people aren't, well, there's traps and stuff like that. So I guess maybe you could call it torture porn.
Yeah, I'd call this like a torture porn home invasion film.
Yeah, I think that's a good, yeah. Or what was that other movie that came out about the blind dude who's guarding his house?
Don't Breathe.
Don't Breathe. I was going to say Don't Blink, but that's another movie. There's a lot of don'ts out there.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you like Don't Breathe, I would say The Collector may have inspired Don't Breathe a little bit. Like, to me, there is some similarities. Obviously, they're not the same movie, but there's a little bit of a similar, going into a house and booby traps and stuff like that. So yeah, it was really good. Enjoyed it. And I believe I watched it on Shudder. So it should be on Shudder Canada.
Yeah, but I can't remember. I think it's on U.S. Shudder as well, but I can't remember off the top of my head. But yeah, the next one, since we'll just go with like the years pretty much, I'm gonna do Stakeland from 2010. Now, this one I have avoided because of the title. It just sounded corny and cheesy, and I'm like, okay, I won't waste my time with this one. And then I started hearing people talk about it and like talking about it highly, and I'm going, okay, now I'm curious. And I seen it was on Shudder, so I decided to give it a watch. And yeah, don't take this title seriously. Just check it out because it's a really violent vampire movie, and like it's some of the way these vampires are horrific. Like,
really,
yeah, they are like terrifying vampires. But yeah, the character development in it is really good. The effects are really good. The story is pretty cool. And it kind of does what I like, which is shows like when this happens and then like the aftermath, post-apocalyptic style afterwards, like all in one movie. Like, 'cause there's zombie films that usually would do like, oh, the zombie infestation has already happened, so this movie starts afterwards and it's only post-apocalyptic. I like movies where it shows the incident happening and then the aftermath as well. I like it all wrapped into one film. And this one does that. And I highly recommend this. It was a really fun, gory vampire film.
Awesome. I remember you told me about this, and I was impressed to hear that because I remember hearing about Stakeland as well, and I think I just didn't watch it because I don't know if I had access to it. Like, I remember hearing of it, and I think before doing this challenge of first-time watches, and only doing first-time watches, it was very easy to just watch Friday the 13th again for the 18th billionth time.
Right.
Or, watch whatever film is your favorite for the 18th billionth time. And I'm not saying that you can't do that, but I just feel like for me, I will probably never go back to doing that again. I will probably always look at doing more first-time watches unless something is a tradition. Like, I'll be honest, Friday the 13th hasn't changed. I don't need to watch it another time. I really don't. Like, right. And I'm not cutting up people that do. Do you do what you want? But it's not like the plot's going to change. Okay? Like,
right.
It's going to be the same. And I just feel like I have a better appreciation now for film. I have a better understanding of what goes into making a good movie, and I can defend my choices better because I watch more movies.
Yep, I'm completely agree because Yeah, until you brought this challenge up to me, like the only the only first time watch stuff that I would do would be mainly the stuff that would come out during the year, and the occasional older film like that I would try to watch during Halloween because I would challenge myself to watch some films I've never seen before. But other than that, it would just be comfort movies, and I would just throw on Sleepaway Camp 1 and 2 or Friday the 13th or whatever just because they're comfort. I know them, they're familiar. Nothing wrong with that. I love doing that. But I agree with you. I think from here on out, I'm going to stick to watching as many first time watches as I can. Maybe like if I ever have that like urge, like, oh, you know, I would really like to see the thing again just because it's been a while. Sure, I'll throw it on. But like, I think mainly I'm just going to stick with first time watches though, because I am loving just like learning about these films that I have missed and kicking myself for a lot of these films that I've missed.
Absolutely. And I feel now I have a much better chance of winning trivia next year if
Yes.
there's another tournament. Um, I watched one movie we'll get to, Miss 45, later, and my trivia question was about Miss 45.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the movie was The Shopkeeper, which I just made up in my head. Now I get, if I had seen Miss 45 beforehand, I would have said Miss 45.
Yeah.
You know, and it just, yet again, like, and I would never say to people either, oh, you need to watch more movies to be cultured. Like, I don't,
Right.
you do you, right? But like, for me, the benefit of watching these films that I missed over or I didn't watch because I looked at it and I went, I don't like the cover art, or oh, that doesn't look interesting. Now I just hit play.
Yeah. Yeah, but I'll like I sometimes still go by cover art because when I'm going at work, I'm trying to like just kind of scroll through real fast. So if there's something that catches my eye, that's the one I'll hit play on. Or if it's just a title that I've heard someone talk about a lot and be like, you know what, I'll give this a chance finally.
Yep.
But yeah, there's I've found some turds amongst them, but like I still have not regretted any of my watches. Even the worst film I've watched, I don't regret watching.
But even when you watch a bad movie, it allows you to figure out what makes that movie bad.
Yeah,
Like if
exactly.
someone said to me, what makes Jessica Forever bad? I would say the plot is basic. There's no real character development. You never exactly figure out why they're doing what they're doing. And it's overly artistic with no content.
Yeah.
You know, that's how I would describe it. I wouldn't just be like, well, it sucks.
Right, exactly. Like now you have a reason and a basis for like why you like films, and you learned and you'll start to realize, oh, well, this is a genre that I never thought I was going to like in horror, and
Well,
you start
and I
getting appreciation for that
appreciate
too.
the low budget to the high budget and how people use their money. If there's
Yeah.
anything that I have grown to appreciate, it's here's, you get a budget of money and there's a lot of work that goes into making a film. It is hard work. We'll get into in the Out of the Dark about the film festival that we're currently both viewing, but I watched a couple of films from that and I saw people on the side just chewing it up. This is shitty. It's like when people watch NFL and they played high school football and they think that they get it.
Yeah.
Like, or you watch a hockey team and you played junior A and you think that you get it. That's my Canadian reference for all my Canadian listeners. Like, it's hard to do those things. It's hard to make a movie. So people that actually get the balls to try to do it, I have a lot of respect for.
Oh, same here.
I have double the respect when you do it well.
Yep.
Right?
Exactly. And yeah, whose movie is it now? I think it's yours now?
I think it's mine. So I'm going to go back in time to The Golem, 1915.
Nice.
That's right. 1915.
Over 100 years old.
So I, of course, heard about this because Scott got this trivia answer or question right on his trivia.
Amazingly.
He like pulled it out of his bum, but he managed to do it. And I was going through Shudder one night this week, and I was like, oh, The Golem. Well, this will make me look impressive on the podcast. So I decided to watch it because I'm all about the prestige. So
You're such a dork.
It's true though. Like I'm a nice person, but I care about prestige. Like I'm so multifaceted and odd that way. But anyway, wow. Like for 1915, what a piece of history. You know, it's a silent film, and the music in it is like, I go back to thinking about, they would have had to record the music live and then paired it up with the film. The camera angles they were using, incredible for 1915. The shading, because obviously it's in black and white, but it's shaded. It has some color in it, but the shading, oh my God, like, and the expression of it being silent and communicating thoughts was incredible. You know, it's about 60 minutes long, 125 actually, with like some cutout scenes, because they're pasting it together, because I guess the original film was lost and they're just pasting it all together as it goes. So, you know, it's not the clearest story in the entire world. Like, you know, spoiler, it's basically about a gentleman that brings back a golem to seek revenge. It's very Frankenstein monster-ish. But it's worth the watch. You know, if you are a horror fan and you care about the history of the genre and where we got our startings from, I think that it's worth your time to sit through this movie and appreciate it for what it is.
Yeah, this is one that I really would like to check out, especially after the trivia. I was like, okay, I need to find this movie. And yeah, just to let everybody, all the listeners know, it's on Canada Shudder. This one is not on the US Shudder.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, this one, I did find it, though, for anybody that is interested. It is streaming free on YouTube. And there is a lot of silent horror films on YouTube streaming, which is nice. So
yeah,
I will be watching that soon. And I'll be looking forward to watching that one because, yeah, that one really sounded like right up my alley. And so, yeah, the next one, because apparently I'm just staying in the newer films this go around.
You mean you're not going back to 1915, Scott?
Nope. Everything I've watched in this last couple of weeks has been 2000s and up. I haven't watched anything older than that, apparently. So the next one I am going to talk about is The Den from 2013. The reason I ended up watching this one was because the Exploding Heads on their, I'm a Patreon on there, and this was one of their more recent episodes, and they covered The Den, and I had never heard of this film, and it actually sounded pretty interesting, so I wanted to give it a check it out. And I found out it was playing on Hulu, so I went to Hulu, found it, gave it a watch. Man, this was a really good found footage film.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really freaking creepy. But it's basically about a woman that wants to do a study for her work on like those chat roulettes or those Russian roulette chats where you're just getting paired up with some random stranger and you guys got to just start talking and you can skip forward and move to a different person if you don't like the conversation. And just like in those types of chats, like she'd be kind of going through and like click on an image and all of a sudden it'd be a guy, and as soon as she pops up on the screen, he would take his pants off and just wag his dick around. So she'd skip, and just like a lot of perverts that she'd have to deal with on there. But yeah, she's going through and she comes across a chat where a person ends up getting killed on the screen, and it like freaks her out. Well, basically this is a story about be careful what you're doing on social media. And yep, bad things start happening and following her and following her friends and stuff like that. And it just gets creepier and creepier and creepier. And man, all I can say is become a Patreon for Exploding Heads, pay the $3 a month, and check out.
Or if you're Canadian.
Or 4 if you're Canadian. And check out, I think it is episode 105, where it's The Den, The Void, and Bone Tomahawk, and listen to their review because they do a phenomenal job covering this film.
Man, we blow Exploding Heads so bad.
We so do.
Like it's Dave Z. I always think it's Dave Z saying, I blow this movie, and they blow this movie. Yeah, we blow your podcast, Dave Z. That's what we do here at Friday Nightmare.
Well, we blow all of our friends that are in the podcasting community that we support.
That sounds really great, Scott.
Yeah, maybe the wrong choice of words, or
I hope you
right
leave that
choice.
in there. That was amazing. Yeah, please leave that. Let's see if we get more viewerships that way. That's awesome.
Of course, I'll leave that in there because I'm not even gonna go there. I'll stop.
Yeah, I think she should stop now. We're not on It's Not Horror. All right, so I guess I'll move on then to keeping on social media, I'm going to jump ahead. I watched this movie called Cam from 2018. And, it's funny how social media has led to the development of so many movies.
I
So
know.
horror movies, right? So Cam is basically about cam girls, about one particular cam girl. And let me tell you, I learned a lot about cam girls. Like, it's a really interesting profession. So for people that aren't aware, cam girls are individuals that identify as female who choose to film themselves and will perform whatever someone wants, and they get tip money. So it doesn't necessarily have to be sexual. It could just be talking. It could be baking cake. It could be anything, actually, for that matter. It's about voyeurism. And this movie really explores, very much a supernatural computer geared thing of what can happen with these online systems. And I think that the girl that was starring in it was the same girl from Truth or Dare and Fantasy Island. She's also, I think, from Pretty Little Liars.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I
I
know
don't
her.
know her name, but
Yeah.
I've seen her in tons of stuff. She's not bad. The acting in this is very much your basic acting, teeny kind of boppy film, but it's definitely more sexual. You don't see too many boobies, but there is some very sexual things that are talked about in the film. Especially when it comes to orgasming and dildos and sex toys and all that kind of stuff. So it's on Netflix. It's on Netflix Canada. And if you enjoy social media movies, or you want to learn more about the webcam girl industry, or some really extreme of what could go wrong, I would recommend checking it out.
Yeah, because this is one that I've been curious about because I've heard a couple others talk about this as well. And then with you saying you really liked it, I'm like, all right, yeah, this will be one I'll have to watch at some point. So the next one that I am going to talk about was the sequel that I talked about, the original one, just last episode, the episode before, but Creep 2. And wow, once again, another movie and the sequel to this movie, just as good as the first film. Like, I really dug the crap out of this one, and it had a little more of a dark humor to it. Like the first one had some dark humor to it, but this one even had a little more, which I love the character, and I think I said his name wrong last time, but the director, screenwriter, and actor was Mark Duplass. I think I said Joe Duplass or something like that in the last episode. But yeah, he's back in this as the killer in this film, and he once again hires someone on to do a documentary style film for him. And this time it's a woman that does these YouTube videos and she has a YouTube channel called Encounters, where she just meets random people online that are just kind of lonely or depressed or are unique, and she just goes and interviews them and hangs out with them and does whatever they ask, to an extent. One guy's obsessed with being treated like a baby, so she's holding him and feeding him a bottle and stuff like that. And this one, she sees the call from the killer, and she's like, "Oh, we'll go check out what he wants." And right off the bat, this time around, he's not hiding anything, and he just straight up says, "I'm a serial killer." And then it's the whole, okay, is he telling me the truth or not? But I love the idea behind this one, because not only he's gotten to the point where he's a 40-year-old man that is going through a midlife crisis where he's just I just don't have these urges to kill like I used to. It's just really bothering me lately. And he's like, I'm losing inspiration on how to do these kills. He's like, so I'm looking at Francis Ford Coppola and seeing how he did his films, and how he's like, my masterpiece was this film. But you know what? I'm going to keep making more films and keep trying. Maybe I'll hit that success again. He's like, and that's kind of what I want to do. And but it's him talking about being a serial killer. And
that's interesting.
Yeah, I was like, I really thought this story was very unique and kind of a interesting take on the whole thing. And the dialogue between the two of the characters in this movie, because that's all there is these two characters the whole entire film. And the dialogue between them is just fascinating and entertaining, and she gives it right back to him, where he doesn't even know what the hell, how to react to her or anything. And it just, yeah, they bounce off each other perfectly. Their chemistry is great. This is a high recommend as well. 9 out of 10 for me.
Wow, 9 out of 10. That's hard for you.
Yeah, and the first one was a 9 out of 10 as well. And they're both playing on U.S. Netflix, so hopefully Canada's Netflix has it, so you can eventually watch these.
Hopefully, one can hope. You never know.
Right?
Canada Netflix. Up in the air. Poor Scott. So anyway, Scott has 5 cats, and this one cat, I think it's Stormy, keeps walking in front of him and sitting on his lap right now, and it's pretty funny. He just keeps moving her, and she keeps coming back. It's like Pet Cemetery at Scott's house.
Yep, she just never leaves me alone.
All right, eventually the cats are just going to take over. Be a haiku of all the kitty cats overtaking Scott.
And, well, just because Mark Nato loves to pick on me, yes, Mark Nato, Mr. Biff is around.
Yep, Mr. Biff is around. That's true. If Stormy's there, then definitely Mr. Biff will be there too.
Yep.
I don't have as many movies to talk about remaining. I think I may just talk about 13 and 14 cameras together. So I watched 13 cameras and 14 cameras, mostly because I listened to its Horror for Dummies. Shout out to Horror for Dummies. They did a great little thing on kids on bikes. Oh my God, it's so funny.
Yeah.
It's so good. Anyway, Daniel, Mr. Luffy, has seen 13 cameras, and he talked a little bit about it, and I thought, oh, I'll watch it, and I enjoyed it. But he's right. The main dude in it is a total mouth breather. He just kind of like breathes out loud for the entire movie.
Oh, like the antagonist?
Yeah, and he looks like he hasn't like showered in like 18
Oh,
years.
he's gross.
Like, it's so like the actor does a really good job of coming across as a complete like freaking creep, you know? Like you would look at this dude and be like, "Oh my God." Like he's creepy. So 13 cameras definitely flows into 14 cameras. So I would strongly recommend watching 13 cameras before you watch 14 cameras. Now you can tell when they made 13 cameras, they weren't planning on making a sequel.
Okay.
Right? I find this a lot with a lot of horror movies, and Venom actually talked about it in the most recent Fresh Cuts episode, is that a lot of American films will sometimes leave it open. And they did leave it open, but I don't think they planned for it, because sometimes when they make sequels to these films, you're like, oh my God, like it's not as good as the original. You know,
Right.
And I would definitely say 14 cameras isn't as good as the original. Is it decent and entertaining to watch? Absolutely. But is it as good as 13 cameras? Not so much. But I would say if you do watch them back to back, which I did, it's a smooth ride, and it will probably make more sense.
Okay. 'Cause, yeah, I'm actually 3/4 of the way through 13 cameras right now.
Okay, cool.
And yeah, because I was watching it today at work, and then I came home and just haven't had a chance to finish it off before we recorded. But I'll be finishing that one probably tonight, and then watch 14 cameras like sometime shortly after that. Just because to watch them both, why not? And besides the gross mouth breather antagonist, man, the husband in this film, oh, I can't stand him.
Yeah, he's not really a nice dude, huh? But like,
oh, he's a piece of shit.
You know, though, it's funny because he talks about like the marriage thing in there, and there's a line where he's like, you know, we met, she wanted to get married, and I think a lot of couples fall into this. We met, we had a good time, she wanted to get married, we got married, she got pregnant, and now everything's changed.
Yep.
And not to get into too much marriage counseling, Heather, here, but I think that that's pretty common. I think a lot of times people meet, they have a good time, but they don't actually look to see if they have the same things in common or expect that things are going to change. And having a child is like the most difficult thing you can do with somebody.
Yes.
Is try to raise another human being. So I think they do a good job in this movie of reflecting that. So as much as he's a jerk, I do understand when he kind of goes into that diatribe of how people get themselves in that situation. It doesn't make it okay what he does, but I do understand how people will end up in those situations.
Yep, exactly. Like I've been there for the most part. For the most part.
Mm-hmm. Minus the nice big mansion house.
Right.
With a big pool, with an in-ground pool.
Oh, how I would love a pool.
Yeah, no kidding, right? It's just you didn't want to clean it and do the work for it. You just want it to be there.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work.
So yeah, I guess I'll just talk about one more film. And I will do the Clovehitch Killer from 2018. Now, if you've seen Summer of '84, you've seen a version of the story that is Clovehitch Killer. Because they both came out right around the same time, like in the same year, but just like right around, like within a couple months of each other. And I think we're pretty much filmed like almost the exact same time. So there's like no way they copied each other. But yeah, this one.
Is this like, what is it, The Burning and Friday the 13th too?
Kind of, yeah.
Is this like the same thing? Oh, cool.
Yeah, kind of in that way, like in that aspect, except for this one's not based in the 80s. I think it may be either 90s or a little more current.
So they're not like, look at the 80s, look at my hair, it's the 80s.
Yeah,
Oh my God, it's the
exactly.
80s. Okay.
And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, yeah, I think it's more modern. I think it's more of a modern take on it. But this one, instead of like in Summer of '84, where the kids are like, "Oh, is the neighbor a killer? Let's kind of figure it out." This one is my dad a killer? And like the whole, let's try to figure this out.
Same idea.
Yeah,
I love it.
But yeah, this one is, I would put it up there right with Summer of '84. Like, if you like that film, you'll like this one. This one's a bit shorter on the runtime, so it's better paced for me. So I think I might like it a little better. But yeah, if you are a fan of that type of film, like Summer of '84 and the like, then you probably will enjoy this.
Nice. The only one that we watched together was From Dark, 2014. We didn't watch it together, but we actually watched that one.
Oh yes, yeah.
Yeah. So this one is a creature feature.
Yep.
And I think it's Australian, isn't it, or is it British?
I think it's Australian.
Okay, so yeah, I think it's Australian too, and so I guess it would be considered Aussie exploitation. Which I'm just using that like term now because
now we know what it is.
I know, right? Now Derek told me, Derek B from Cinema Attacks and No More Room in Hell and a bunch of other podcasts. He was the one that coined that term, and now I get it. But yeah, it's a total Aussie creature feature film, and it's not bad. Like, it's not a bad film. It's entertaining.
Yeah. My only complaint, like I have a complaint about this with a lot of horror films, but this complaint is so first world problem, and that is I'm watching it on my phone, and everything's filmed in the dark for the most part. So it's very hard to see on my phone, like when I have it especially pushed back. So that's my complaint to myself.
That's you watching it though on a phone.
Yeah, this is my own fault. Why it's not against the movie, but yeah, this movie was pretty creepy. Like the monster in it was kind of frightening. The things that it could do, and kind of like, and it was pretty fast paced too.
It was pretty fast paced, and like it kind of left at the ending not knowing what was going to happen.
Yeah.
Would you consider that a Lovecraft movie?
I was thinking about that because I remember you brought that up, thinking it might be. I don't know if I'd call that Lovecraft.
Okay, see, I just consider everything I don't really get Lovecraft. There's creatures in it. So I don't know where the line is, so I'm glad that you clarified that.
Yeah, I would say this one's like, I would say close to it, but I wouldn't consider it one.
You know which one I thought was, and I'm just going to mention it quickly, Island Zero, 2018. It's on Prime. It's based out of these creatures attacking this fishing village in Maine. I thought that was Lovecraft, but I think if you watch it, you can tell me.
Okay.
Or the listeners can watch it and tell me. It's free on Prime. It is low budget with its acting and everything. Not the worst low budget money movie I've seen, but definitely low budget. Slow burn. And the creatures made me think of Lovecraft.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to give it a watch and see, because I read the synopsis last night when you said you were watching it, and sounds interesting.
Yeah, I think you would dig it. Like I was lukewarm on it. It was fine. It was no color out of space, which even though I am not a Lovecraft fan, I respect that movie.
Yeah, because that was just a well-made film.
Well-made film, entertaining, well done. This was fine. I think I'm just curious. If you do watch it, you can tell me whether it's Lovecraft or not, because I have no idea.
Okay, I'll do that. Yes, I guess that will be the end of our what we've been watching. And we can just jump into what we've been listening to.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I just started listening to is Chilling Tales for a Dark Night, a horror anthology. So similar to the scary story ones that I talked about a couple weeks ago, this one is also horror anthology, but it's more adult themed.
Okay.
So they'll say more, not that it's like sexual or stuff, but they'll use more sexual terms in it. They also use some language in there that some people may or may not find offensive. So for example, they use the word retarded. And I personally try not to use the term retarded. I don't, I would never, if someone used the term retarded with me, I would never stop them and be like, oh, you're being offensive. Stop that. You're upsetting me. I choose not to. There are other terms that if someone does use, like any kind of racial slur or homophobic slur, I will stop and put a clear end to, because that to me is crossing the line. But I think, unfortunately, the word retarded is still very much used in our pop culture, and people are trying to learn not to say it.
Yeah.
So I like to educate more than scold if people use that term, because I think it's definitely coming around. So, just as a FYI that those terms are used, or other language that maybe someone might find offensive. But they're told by different narrators, which I think is really cool. And I believe it's told by the narrator. The narrator is the person that wrote the story.
Oh, nice.
So it's a very, very cool concept. It currently only has just over 3,000 followers. But if you enjoy storytelling, especially right now, if you want something to play while you're sitting at the campfire or something like that, might be totally worth a listen. So check it out. It's on Podbean, and we'll include the link to it in our show notes.
Yeah, I will be definitely subscribing to these guys because I'm curious. I want to hear this. But yeah, the one that I am going to talk about is the Midnight Drive-In, which is a horror movie, or well, I should just say kind of like cult film review podcast. Like they cover a lot of horror films, but they also cover non-horror cult films and some comedies and stuff like that. But it's hosted by Brian Wolford, Doug McKinney, who is a fellow Canadian, Heather.
Woo!
So a Canadian podcaster that you're now going to have to be friends with.
Now I got to be best friends with.
And then Noah, which I can't remember his last name, but he was a fairly new addition over the last couple of years. But they usually do they do two films. They review two films that have a theme. So one theme could be, oh, let's watch these two movies that star this actor, or let's watch these two movies that has a dinosaur wearing pajamas, because there's a couple of those movies or something, like just something random, like some weird tiny little thing that they could pick out of a film and find another film with that tiny little thing, and they'd be like, yep, that's our theme. They're fun about it, and they are good at reviewing them. They each take their turns talking about the film and whatnot, and they also do a what they've been watching segment, and they cover pretty much all film genres when they're talking about what they've been watching, because they're comic book nerds, they're sports nerds, they talk about everything.
Do they talk about magic cards and how they almost went pro?
Nope, that's only me. Because in case the listeners really want to know, this is how cool I am. I almost went pro. There. Now Heather can continue to make fun of me over it.
I don't make fun of you. I do think it's cool that you did that. I just tease you.
I know you.
Remember, I only tease people I like, so.
Exactly. That's why I like to joke about it, because it's just fun. But they are back to the podcast. The Midnight Drive-In can be found on Spotify, iTunes, and most podcast catcher apps. I'm not sure if they're on Podbean. I will see, and if they are, I'll get the link there and share it. But I'll also share their other links.
Awesome. So we'll take a short break now, and we'll hear from one of our fellow podcasters, and we'll be back with you shortly.
Hey, Andrew.
Hey, Maddie.
Do you like horror movies?
I sure do.
Well, did you know that most horror movies are inspired by real-life horror?
Really? Like what?
Well, take The Shining, for instance. That's based on Stephen King's real-life addictions, or The Purge, which could be our country any minute now.
Oh, and The Strangers, which is based on a real-life murder. People should be talking about these things.
Hey,
Guys.
Oh, hey, Producer
Producer
Michael.
Michael, hi.
Well, I hate to break it to you, but somebody already is. It's you!
That's right. We are Friday the 13th, the podcast where we talk about horror in real life and horror in media, all from an LGBTQ perspective.
Because we gay, y'all.
We are proud members of the Legion Podcast Network, and we can be found on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, or wherever your favorite podcasts are found.
And follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Come along with us on this crazy journey, and as always,
Get slayed.
So welcome to our feature presentation. So right off, I want to acknowledge that this is a heavy topic. I already did at the beginning, and I want to thank Scott for coming on this ride with me. For a long time, I have wanted to talk about rape revenge films. I identify as a female. I identify as a heterosexual female, and this is a topic that I haven't heard a lot of females go into great detail on. I've definitely heard females talk about it, but I wanted to explore the academic side of it and how it affects film. And right off the bat, when I brought it up to Scott, he said yes, but I know that it's a topic that is hard for him for clearly, valid reasons why.
Yeah, it's not an easy topic to talk about.
Scott is a very respectable, kind human being. And I think for any human being, rape or sexual assault is a difficult thing to discuss, especially for a man discussing it for women. So Scott, I want to thank you again for coming on this journey with me, and for being willing to discuss this and for bringing your thoughts and your knowledge to it.
Oh, absolutely.
Takes a lot of strength, and I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you. And yeah, I will definitely be sitting back quietly and listening for a little bit of this, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm going to do a little bit of the promo stuff. We already kind of broke this out before, simply just due to, the information that I found was very female-centric, but we're going to be taking this in a different route as well, and looking at male sexual assault and that in films as well. So as I said earlier, I understand this could be a topic that could be triggering for some people. I will include some resources that I send to Scott for the show notes for individuals if they listen to this and it does trigger something and they need to reach out to somebody. So first thing we're going to look at is the definition of rape. So definition of rape is unlawful sexual activity, usually sexual intercourse carried out forcibly or under the threat of injury against a person's will, or with a person who is beneath a certain age or incapable of valid consent because of mental illness, mental deficiency, intoxication, unconsciousness, deception, compared to sexual assault or statutory rape. And then it kind of goes on to some other things of robbing, despoiling, or carrying away with a person by force. So that's the definition that we're going to be working with. I would argue that most films use that do rape revenge. Like, I think this is pretty accurate. Scott, would you agree?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Okay. So a great article that was written by a PhD student at the University of Western Ontario is about rape revenge films. So this woman wrote a thesis statement, so a thesis dissertation, I should say, A Day of the Woman, Feminism and Rape Revenge Films. So she wrote this back in 2012. And what she actually did is she did a comparison between The Last House on the Left of 1978, I believe, and then I Spit on Your Grave in 1972. Or no, Last House on Your Left, 1972, Spit on Your Grave, 1978. Am I messing up the years there?
I think that's right.
Yeah. And then followed up by the remakes. So this writer looked at the narratives of how films express cultural fear and anxieties about women, traditional gender relations, and she argued that rape revenge subgenre acts to conditions the way in which common perceptions in societal world at large. So I want to just read her opening paragraph of her thesis. So when you're doing a thesis statement, your opening paragraph is kind of setting the tone for the argument that you want to use. And what she was going with was a version of feminist horror. So feminist horror films are compelling, complex cultural objects. This complexity is due to two categories that are linked together in the name: feminism and the horror genre. So as we know, there's actually not a lot of women involved in horror, and we now have Women in Horror Month of February of each year. So we are beginning to see that kind of burst through a little bit more. But as she's writing this article, she's talking about how interesting it is that these two concepts are coming together. So the horror genre is often thought of as superficial without any cultural relevance. Indeed, the genre is seen to be propagated as a patriarchal perspective that offers no pleasure for or excludes the female spectator. So this has been a long growing thing, that females are not catered to. And I think if you listen to any podcast, and I listen to the gentleman talk about how hot women are, how great the tits were, as a straight female, I can appreciate the beauty of another woman. But I do have to expose myself to constantly hearing about how men feel about the female body, and how attractive they think tits are, and how attractive this is. You know, I don't get to listen to a podcast where I hear girls talking about guys' dicks the entire time, or how great their six-pack is. That just doesn't happen. It is very isolating for female spectators because of that. Over the course, the category of feminism is not without its own complexity and problems. Debate about what feminism is, or who feminisms are and what they believe, have raged through the first, second, and third wave of feminist social movements. These two internally complex categories, as they are brought together in the genre of feminist horror, produce passionate debates not only among feminist horror fans, but within the general North American population of film viewers. I consider myself a feminist, and I've said this many, many a times. Now, there are levels of feminism, and I think that's what we fail to forget. And I also am a supporter of the Me Too movement. What I am not a supporter of is applying the Me Too movement to every single thing, because it loses the impact of the Me Too movement. So really what she's talking about here is that females have been spectators. So when we start bringing in these rape revenge films and females fighting back, it is presenting a vision of feminism, but how do people actually view it? How do other females view it? How do males view it? So similarly, rape revenge films, which also came into their own during the 1970s, are often considered horror because of the way in which they utilize rape as an animating principle, echoing the slasher genre's use of sexual elements to advance or otherwise enhance narratives. So in a slasher narrative, we see the violence, the killing, the cutting, all that stuff. Well, you add rape on top of that, which is a violent act in itself, or at least how it's presented in the 1970s films. It's enhancing that narrative impact of wanting to get revenge, of the fear, all that kind of stuff. Both slasher and rape revenge films are also symptomatic of a broader cultural turn during the 70s, where narratives of revenge granting the female victim a much higher degree of agency. Now, if we look at the 70s film, though, as we get into a little bit later, who is actually getting the revenge?
Yeah.
Right. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. So the representation of sexual violence at their core offers a rich source of investigation for feminism, because of which the way rape narrates are tied to the issues of gender identity. As Clover further notes in the 1970 genre film, femaleness allowed the body story to be told with a far greatest relish, and the female protagonist, female rage prompt to a new energy in societal story. So what does that mean? This is one, when we see these scenes of graphic rape in Virgin Springs, Last House on the Left, I Spit on Your Grave, any human being that has healthy boundaries when it comes to sexual consent is going to watch those movies and go and be mad. They're going to be upset. They're going to be sad. They're going to be disgusted. And they're going to be very pleased when that individual gets revenge.
Yep.
It's going to cause that dread, that angst that you can get from a slasher film when someone is being stalked and you want them to get away. We see that violence occur and we look forward to the revenge. So this is where it begins to that empower that feminism that we're talking about. So the idea that this PhD student is talking about is that starting in the 70s, we start to see the application of feminism that was going on that time coming out through these rape revenge films. So she cited a couple other pieces of work within her art, her thesis, because the thesis is like 50-page long, right? Like it's a very long documentation. So she cited watching rape, film and television in post-feminist culture, So this was an article that was written in 2001. This article, which explores the representation of rape in American films from 1980 to the present. So the idea is that now rape is placed in our everyday world and is not only as real physical events, but as part of our fantasy, fears, desires, and consumption practices. Watching Rape tackles a difficult question of how representation of rape and feminism has changed over time, focusing primarily on the intersection of rape and post-feminism. So this is a really, really interesting statement when we say things like fears, fantasy, desires, and consumption practices. And I don't want people to read this and think, oh, someone's going to watch a rape revenge film and fantasize about doing that to somebody. That's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is someone seeing this film and fantasizing about somebody getting their comeuppance. We're talking about women who have had that done to them and seeing this and going, I wish I could do that. I wish someone would avenge me, or having fantasies of perhaps avenging other women that have been in that situation, or men watching this and dreaming about avenging other women. Now, obviously, someone could be watching this and, you know, into a different kind of sexual activity and could take another kind of fantasy from it. And I'm choosing purposely not to go down that route because that's not going to be effective towards this conversation.
No.
Right? So the idea is that the representation of rape provides a space to bridge film analysis with real life activism in hopes of lessening the incidence of sexual violence through representation of it. So what we mean by that is a young man watches a rape film and goes, oh my God, that's so graphic. Oh my God, that's so, you know, violent. If we look at Last House on the Left and those rape films, or I Spit on Your Grave, they're violent. They're humiliating. They're uncomfortable to sit through. You've said it yourself, uncomfortable topic to sit with. So the idea is that if we present this to people that are, you know, fresh slates, because we're fresh slates when we're born, right? We learn consent and we learn about that as we go. The idea is that someone will see this and not want to engage in it.
Right.
Right? It will build that moral compass of what is right or wrong, or also can increase people's need to talk about it, right? To be more open about these things happening. Now, the only thing I would argue with that is these films like I Spit on Your Grave, Last House on the Left, is always very violent rapes. It's over the top rapes. And I'm not saying rapes like that don't happen, because they obviously do. But there's non-cutting and slicing and dicing rapes that happen every day that are just as impactful. Right? So it's walking that fine line, but overall, this article is very much presenting that, hey, we're bringing these issues to the limelight through film, and we're trying to educate people. And if we can get more people aware that this even occurs, the better off we are. So I definitely applaud that message. And it really does reflect what was happening during this time. You know, if we look at the 60s, we had the creation of the birth control pill. Now, I don't think Scott can understand the impact of the birth control pill, but maybe for men, he will one day if that does happen for him.
Yeah.
Right? Because the birth control pill gave women the power to decide if and when they get pregnant. No longer did they need to rely on a man to wear a condom, no matter that they had to use, you know, methods like pull out and stuff like that. They were able to take a pill once a day that would prevent pregnancies. That's huge. That was huge for the 1960s.
Yeah, that's really huge.
Right? And it was almost saying you are no longer just a baby-making machine. You can do more than that. So then we move into the 70s and we start, or sorry, it's still in the 60s. We have the Equality of Pay Act in 1963. Now, we still don't have equal pay for men and women completely. But the fact that an act got put in 1963, so up to that point, it was fine to pay a woman less because she was a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And owning property and stuff like that. At one time, I was talking with some of my girlfriends. You had to get a note from your husband to buy property.
Really?
That was okay, yeah.
Wow.
You know, like we've come a very, very long way as females. And then you know, sorry, go ahead, Scott.
I'll say, I mean, I guess that really doesn't surprise me because I have heard of old laws that were still in place in some of the states here where women had to get permission from their husbands to cut their hair.
Right?
Yeah,
It's very, very
not surprising at all.
Right? Like it's so fascinating how, we had this rise in the 60s of women, and then, the bra burning and other activities. And this is, we're talking about primarily in the United States and in Canada, right? That the development of these things.
Yeah.
And this, creation of rape revenge films. Like, talk about, and you can look at this at two different ways, okay? So you can look at the rape revenge film as a male figure becoming frustrated that the female is gaining more power, wanting to subdue the female through the action of rape.
Yeah.
And then the female rebelling back and pushing back harder. Or you can look at it as, a good time slasher where this woman is treated unfairly and comes back with a bang, or other people come back with a bang to get justice. That's absolutely fine too. But there's no, if anything has taught me through doing this research, nothing is a coincidence.
No, not at all.
Right?
There is a reasoning behind it.
Movies are made because they reflect what's happening in popular culture at the time. So if we look using that feminism argument, and we look at, women coming into their own, as we talk about with this article, and we break down some subcategories of rape revenge films. So I have broken down these categories. They are not made up categories from anywhere. So if you don't agree with them, that's fine. But this is what I saw after reading this article and doing a comparison. So the first category for the beginning of feminism was woman victim, others fighting. So others acknowledging that a woman has been victimized and wanting to get revenge. So the first movie I found that represented that was The Virgin Spring.
Yep.
Now, you've seen this movie.
Yes, I covered it with Gary Hill and Suzanne and Iris on the Cinema Beef.
So what were your thoughts on this movie? What was the revenge that was gotten, or how did the people deal with the rape that occurred? I believe it was someone's daughter who was raped.
Yep. Yeah, because this was, I think I could be wrong on the country, but I think it might have been a Swedish film. But yeah, it's about this family who sends out this daughter to, I think, go pray at a far off church, and they give her, or they let their what would you call that, like their servant or maid go with her to like just kind of keep her company, make sure she gets there okay, and she gets ambushed by these three bandits. And this film has a lot of symbology throughout it, that there's a lot more deeper meaning behind it, but like it is pretty much what Last House on the Left is, like with the whole father finding out what happened by the fact that these people, after doing this vile act to this woman and killing her, they go to the parents' house not realizing it's their house, and they find out that these bandits have their daughter's handmade dress on them, and the parents enact the revenge. So like it has that it pretty much toes the exact same line as Last House on the Left, which is, obviously more popular, but like this was the first one to kind of do that and show like the grief that mother and father go through, and what a father will do to, put his daughter to rest.
And The Virgin Springs came out in 1960. So we're looking at just the beginning of the female feminism movement.
Yep.
And this is still very much young girl taken advantage of, parents find out, seek vengeance, right? We still don't see a lot of empowerment from the young lady throughout it. And then 12 years later, we have Last House on the Left. And the interesting thing about this film, first of all, Kill the Cast did a review on this. So if you haven't had a chance to listen to their episode, please check it out. But the girls fight back. The two main characters in this do try to fight back. They try to escape. They try to survive. And unfortunately, they don't in the original, I believe, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, and very similar to the Virgin Springs, it's a gang. They are found out by the parents, and the parents enact some very extreme body horror revenge.
Yes, they
for
do.
1972.
Yeah, especially the mother.
Yes, the mother does some pretty intense stuff. She bites off Weasel's penis and leaves him to bleed to death, which would be a pretty painful death as a man. And that's almost like a demasculation, which is really interesting for 1972. Like, when you are removing a male's penis, if that male, identifies as heterosexual or possibly homosexual, or as a man in general, and to remove their penis is a demasculation. That's happened to females before. They've had sexual organs removed as well.
Yeah, and this could also be looked at as taking away his weapon that he used.
Yes, absolutely. It's a demasculation, a removal of weapon, and because she is a woman, she is fighting back on another woman's, her daughter and the young friend's death, right? So she is getting that revenge and coming full force from it. So I think that is very, very interesting. Where John, the husband, manipulates Junior into committing suicide. Like, it's very interesting how that whole film comes around and the roles that people play in it. But if we look at the revenge piece of it, it's still very much the parents getting the revenge, but we're seeing more of a role from the mother in it, and also some very graphic revenge in it as well. So we'll flash forward now to Death Wish, 1974. So even though this isn't a horror movie, it's an extremely popular movie. And the daughter is raped, the mother is attacked, and Paul Kersey's character goes out for revenge because he tries to go through the police methods. Everything fails. He's unable to get the revenge or the justice that he wants to the police system, and he takes the justice into his own hands. This still happens today. We saw that in MFA.
Yeah.
We haven't come that far from 1974 when it comes to sometimes justice not being had for any victim of sexual assault.
Yeah, and in this one, in this case, though, Paul Kersey, because I don't think he actually, if I remember correctly, gets revenge on the people that actually did it.
Yeah, he does. That's who he hunts down.
See, I thought, okay, I might be thinking of...
He kills them first, I believe, and then eventually he gets them. He kills a whole bunch of people that do wrong things.
Yeah, because I was going to say, because that's where I was going to tie this in, is where he's like starting to become like
he's a
hero.
Vigilante. Absolutely.
Yeah, vigilante, taking out people that are hurting the others.
But he goes after the people that hurt his daughter.
Okay, I couldn't remember if he did or not. Okay, my bad.
No, that's okay. And then I'm going to flash forward to 2012, American Mary. So Mary is a medical student who can't afford to stay in graduate school, ends up doing surgeries underground. Now, mind you, she ends up getting raped by her professor. And she actually goes to a party, she gets drugged. Like, this is a very much I don't want to say a realistic rape, but a rape that probably happens very often. She shows up at this party, she gets drugged, they take her to a bedroom, they take advantage of her. The rape scene is just as equally uncomfortable, whether it's bloody or not. It's obviously very forceful. He puts his hand over her mouth so she can't breathe at several points. And she tells, so she's connected with a gentleman who owns a strip club who is equally as shady, who treats women very poorly. I was talking to Scott at one point. Mary walks in and this other woman is performing oral sex on him, and he basically pushes her away. And what that symbolizes is she's garbage. Yeah. Because if we saw a woman do that, well, she was getting oral sex from a guy, people would refer to her as a bitch. But no one even acknowledges that scene of how this woman is performing head and seen as quote unquote a whore, because that's really what she's there for. Yeah, that's part of the interview. She's given him a BJ and he tosses her away so disrespectfully from a very intimate moment. Anytime you're choosing to engage with sexual activity with somebody, it is seen as an intimate thing. Like, they have your penis in their mouth.
Right.
That's a pretty intimate act, right? So he's not a stand-up character either. But anyway, she communicates what's happened and then they take revenge on the professor. So she actually doesn't go. I don't believe she goes into. Oh no, she eventually does. That's right. So they bring him to her, isn't it? And
I think they bring. Yeah, I think they bring him to that room, and then
yes, and she takes revenge. So it's a joint effort in taking the revenge on the individual, right? So we still see that kind of joint effort in getting revenge on the individual. So the beginning of feminism, at least stating that these activities are incorrect and inappropriate. Then we move to a second stage, which is the person starts to take revenge. So woman victim and fighting back. So we see this first in I Spit on Your Grave, 1978. Now, I have not seen the original. I've just seen the remake. Have you seen the original, Scott?
Yes, I have.
It sounds very similar.
Yeah, they are very similar, though the revenge aspect and, well, the rape in the remake is even more uncomfortable and over the top. Like, I think they amped up what the first one was to the extremes for the whole film. Revenge, the rape, everything. Where this one, yeah, it's uncomfortable as hell and still horrific what happens. But, like, I think the remake just kind of ramps it all up even more.
Okay. It's good to know because I haven't seen the original. For the original, it sounds a little bit more timid. Same thing happens. She's basically gang raped and traumatized. And here, though, the church is involved. So she ends up going to kind of pray for forgiveness about what she's going to do. And that's not in the remake. So I thought that was really interesting being in 1978. And I don't know if that's still the idea that, she's a victim and she's getting the okay from the church to get revenge. She can't have the strength to just do it on her own accord. She needs to have God's blessing in order to move forward with it. I don't know if that's what that means or if it was just really representing the Christian culture at the time, but I think that it's an interesting thought. I don't know if you have any thoughts or opinions on that.
I really can't say because I don't remember that scene because it's been so long since I've seen it.
But it's still the beginning that she manages to figure out how to get revenge. So she sets up Matthew to have the groceries delivered. She ends up killing him. So she's the one that goes through the action of the actual harm. She may get spiritual guidance for it, but she is the one that physically moves forward with the murders. And then Miss 45, 1981. So this one was really interesting because the rape scenes were very random. It seemed like everywhere in New York City that this woman went, she got sexually assaulted.
Yeah, all in one day.
All in one day. And I'm not to say that would not happen, but it was very, I don't want to say quick sexual assaults either, but it almost looks superficial and fake. To me, it did not really represent what sexual assault could look like. Because of the randomness of it and the quickness of it and the aftermath of it, didn't seem as impactful as other films. I don't know if you felt that way or.
Yeah. The only thing that I took away from this one is we have ourselves a silent protagonist. In other words, a woman that does not have a voice.
Which you can argue most women don't.
Yeah.
Right.
That's exactly what I was thinking is what they were probably going with this.
And that's a good point. I think you're right on the money there, and I didn't even think about that. How she empowers herself is she gets a gun and she just kind of becomes a vigilante as well. And she gets to the point where it seems like she's not too selective, but at the same time, it's almost like a Me Too movie without being a Me Too movie.
Yeah, because it almost like the way I looked at that part was, especially towards the end, it almost became like extreme feminism where all men are bad.
Yes.
And she takes it out on all men at that point.
And that became people that uses Me Too in a way to create stronger divisions between men and women. The scene that I think is a representation of a healthy Me Too. Now, I don't believe with killing somebody at the scene, but when they're at the restaurant, there's a gentleman that's being very creepy. And he's hitting on them, and they tell him to go away. And then he follows her, and he's like, oh, come back to my photography studio. We'll have a good time. And they already saw him making out with some other girl earlier. And she goes back, and she shoots him. Now, I think we can all be aware of the fact that women who engage in modeling or in New York City at that time probably were taken advantage of by men like that.
Yeah.
And so I think that to me is a Me Too thing. Obviously not her shooting him in the middle of the, though I will say when I saw that, I was like, well, I guess that's how you get stuff done from a female perspective of what this guy was probably planning on doing. Though you never really find out for sure because nothing really happens. That is what we're talking about for Me Too. We're not talking about I go to a party, I go upstairs with my boss, because I believe she leads him upstairs to be intimate, and then while they're being intimate, she chooses to harm him.
Mhm.
That is taking it down another route, because he asked her to go to the party. That one scene, he's asked her to go to the party with him. They're watching across the office and they see a woman and man engaged in sexual intercourse in another office. He looks at her, kind of indicating, like, you get the impression that he's hoping that will be him and her, which, if it's a consensual activity, there's not a problem with that, right? So I think that it's very interesting in that movie how it kind of starts off where you get where her avocation is coming from, to where she starts to shoot innocent people. Like when she drops, even though you see that guy trying to pick up girls and he's getting angrier and angrier that no one will respond to him on the street, and she drops something, he goes to chase her to get it back to her. She becomes afraid and shoots him. We don't know ever what his intentions would have been.
Right.
Like, I would like to think he was just going to give her back what she dropped.
Right. That's kind of what I thought,
right,
when I watched that.
But with his behavior earlier, do we really know that?
Right.
Right. So I think that that movie does a really good job. And maybe this is a movie that could be remade now with the Me Too movement. And, like, it's not bad to have Me Too movies. Okay. That's not a bad thing. It's using the movement as a way to educate, not isolate, and make men feel like shit. Like, the point of Me Too is to educate. So I think if we could make Miss 45 this year and have it, bring it into modern times and look at what really that movement means, I think we could have some really interesting conversations around that. So
absolutely, I completely agree.
Nice. I'm glad that you think so too, because that means I'm on the right track. And I guess we'll move to I Spit on Your Grave 2. Have you seen I Spit on Your Grave 2? And do you see the similarities with Myth 45?
So, I was like kind of, sort of, but like the only true similarity I've seen here was the whole model being tricked by a photographer in New York and the horrific things that happen here. Like, I will be frank, I stopped halfway through. I have not actually finished the film.
Okay.
But I got enough of the film to where I'm going, all right, I'm good.
Yeah, it's you probably get it. You're pretty clear with it. Where this is a little bit more interesting is it pulls in human trafficking as well.
Yeah.
So this looks at, a young woman wants to be a model. She gets tricked by a photographer. But what happens is one of the photographer's brothers or his brothers follows her back to her house and becomes obsessed with her and tries to have intercourse with her. And I believe she hurts the brother or kills the brother. I can't remember because it's been a little while, but the photographer gets mad and kidnaps her and takes her, and they end up in Bulgaria. And she's left in a basement on a mattress and basically used as human trafficking. Men pay to come in and rape her repeatedly.
Yeah, this one is that's why I stopped, because I was just getting angry at this film.
It's a very hard film to watch, and I think what I will commend this film for, and there's another film out there called Traffic that I can't sit through because it's too real about what human trafficking is.
Yeah.
And how relevant human trafficking is. A couple years ago, my friend was involved in an organization against human trafficking, and I went to a gala to support her. And I was just dating my ex-husband at the time. Like, I think this is back in 2010. So more than a few years ago, I guess a decade now. I just don't realize how much time has gone by. And I brought him, and they showed this film about human trafficking. And it was the fucking toughest thing I've ever had to sit through. Ooh. Because human trafficking happens at your neighborhood mall.
Yeah.
There's a grooming stage that happens. They, get basically these young girls to think that they're boyfriends. They get them to leave home, and then they become sex slaves, and they keep them imprisoned, or young men. And it's disgusting. So I do think I will applaud this film on trying to bring the human trafficking side into it. I think that's really, really cool that they're trying to expose that. And I guess maybe really cool isn't the right word, but I think it's great that they're trying to educate people on that. Now, what's also interesting in this is that there's a female, I don't know if you got to this point, but there's a female who you think is going to be, a protagonist that ends up being part of it. Yeah. Because she was a victim of sexual assault and is now continuing the practice. And there's this one police officer that kind of thinks something is going on, is trying to figure it out, and he shows up at the end when Katie has fought back and used a vice to destroy a man's nuts and penis. I don't know if you got to that scene.
Nope.
Yeah, so it's a pretty graphic scene. And the police officer basically lets her go, and she makes it to the U.S. Embassy. I thought that movie was probably pretty, to me, walked the line of more, this is what can happen with human trafficking, and I applaud them for going there. Because it goes back, and I spit on your grade 3 to Katie's story, which is good because it shows the aftermath of rape and what someone will go through. But I thought this one did a great job of showing rape revenge, but also talking about human trafficking. So, yeah. Props to I Spit on Your Grade 2 for that. And then revenge. We've talked about revenge before, 2017. I don't know how much more we need to go into it, but basically this woman goes away with her boyfriend, and she is raped by his business partner. And some people may watch that movie and go, well, she led him on. Look how she was dancing.
Yeah.
So this woman...
That's not the case.
Exactly, right? So automatically Scott's reaction is that's not okay, which is a very normal reaction looking for consent, right?
Yeah.
But it was very much playing on that, well, she's dressing the part, she's grinding on him, and him being like, well, you showed like you liked me last night. What's the problem now? What do you mean you don't want it? That is a very realistic conversation that could occur. Now, when she becomes super, camo killer survival girl, I don't know how much that transition is accurate, right, or her surviving what she survives. But if we look at that scene in general, yes, absolutely. Yeah,
because you've heard the term, oh, well, she must be asking for it because she dresses like that.
All the time. I've had it said to me.
And I'm not surprised.
I remember,
a lot of women get that said to them.
Right? Well, you're dressed like a slut, so you must be a slut.
It's like, no, that's not it at all.
But it's interesting, right? Because women who are heterosexual are constantly trying to walk this line. So females watch horror movies. If I listen to a podcast and they talk about how hot a girl is, she's not wearing a lot of clothes. And she's showing her body and she's looking good and she's being like promiscuous and stuff like that. So if I'm like, well, I want to get a guy to like me, I guess I should do that too. Well, then you're a whore.
Right.
Right. So, and I'm not trying to attack any male for that. I think that's, a problem that we have within our society, and especially North America, that has been cultivated through media, family environments and socialized in. And I'm not pointing the fingers and blaming anybody.
Yeah, it's starting to get a little better, but it's still there.
It is, right? And I think that it's a difficult subject. And even as I'm talking about it, I'm like, oh my God, how do I communicate this properly? Because, as women, we want to be empowered through our sexuality if we're heterosexual. And I'm sure women that are, homosexual as well, or identify as lesbian or transgender feel the same way. I just can't speak to that because I'm not that. I'm a heterosexual female, right? So I can only speak to my own personal experience. So you walk this line of wanting to look good, but I have to think twice of ordering an Uber. I have to think twice of where I go, and how is that okay? It's not, but it is what it is, right? So I think it's just really interesting that we represent Jen here, beautiful woman, model body, dances very sexy, flirtatious, and automatically that means that, she must want sex whenever, and I have every right as a man to take it. Mm-hmm. It's just a really interesting concept. And of course, she gets revenge for herself, and that's why it's in this category, because she empowers and fights back. And that's really well done. But it's an interesting look at it. So then we get to telling the story of rape and the aftermath. So we move from the female getting revenge and only that. So it was really in Revenge and I Spit on Your Grave too. It ends with the female either getting into the helicopter or getting into the embassy or escaping, but you don't really see what the outcome is. You don't really see what the after effects are. So these are the movies that do that. So I Spit on Your Grave 3, Vengeance is Mine. Have you seen this one?
Yes, because you ended up bringing this one up and told me it was a very interesting take. So I wanted to kind of see what it was like.
And what did you think of it? Did you think from your, I know that you don't have a lot of knowledge on this, but do you think it kind of showed what someone would have to do afterwards, like the therapy and stuff like that? Like, did you think it was a fair representation of?
Yeah, I thought it was a pretty, from what I know, pretty accurate representation of what someone that's dealt with a trauma like this would have to go through, and that it's not something that's ever going to go away, and that this is probably a course a therapy session they would probably have to take over and over and over again for a very, very long time, if not for the rest of their life.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. And for someone not having, not being female, doesn't yet again mean that men can't be assaulted, and we're going to get to that in a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it really did, and I really applaud them for that. I really applaud them for showing her being, standoffish towards new people, particularly men, going to this group therapy group, thinking that the whole touchy-feeling stuff is bullshit, and just being angry and having these fantasies of anger, because we got to remember she's committed some pretty intense murders.
Yeah.
I will give I Spit on Your 3 such I Spit on Your Grave 3, these are not just rape revenge films. They really aren't. They are films that explore some real issues. And I Spit on Your Grave 3, Vengeance is Mine. Yes, it has some cool kills and it has some cool shit that happens in it, whether it's real or fantasy. But it also explores that there's some real aftermath and pain that would come from a situation like that. She didn't just go back to her regular everyday life. One of my biggest issues with Sleeping with the Enemy with Julia Roberts is she leaves her abusive husband and then starts a new life out in the countryside and everything's fine and she's just living her best life. That's horseshit. That's horseshit. That's not actually what would happen. So I do obviously this movie is exaggerated, but I do like how it shows different types of sexual assault, like a young woman being sexually assaulted by her stepfather.
Yep, and I like the fact that they had a father here.
Yes.
After his daughter was raped and she committed suicide.
Yes.
It was his way of grieving. I thought that was very well done.
And his pain and his wanting to advocate. And he talks about, I got my daughter to come forward, but they couldn't get the evidence. And even with the cops that are in it, you get a real empathy for those police officers. I think that the police officers that were in it cared, but I think that the justice system sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. And we have this fair due process for a reason, but there's situations like this that occur and the victim just gets further victimized by the system.
Yeah.
And I want to give a shout out to 22 Shots because I know they covered all of the I Spit on Your Graves, and I strongly recommend that you listen to them for a more in-depth discussion of these movies.
Yeah, because they cover these films very well.
They always do. And they always really bring some great insight to it. So I want to shout them out and encourage people to listen to that podcast. So next is a movie called Una. Now, Una is not a horror film, but Una is about a young woman who confronts an older man at her workplace who repeatedly statutory raped her when she was a 13-year-old child. And the movie goes back and forth between current day of her confronting this man and what happened. And it really takes a look at the sexual predator concept. So this movie shows a meeting between Una and this neighbor when she's a 13-year-old girl, how they start off friendly, and then she starts seeking out him, he starts seeking out her, and talks about their first kiss and how they'll meet in the park, and he talks about, I knew it was wrong, I knew I shouldn't be seeing you, but I couldn't stop thinking about you, and I should have stopped, I should have did this, and I didn't. And it kind of goes through back and forth of her processing this and her calling him out at his work. This is at his workplace. So he ends up having to take her to the lunchroom and they're having this full out, you assaulted me, you ruined me. And she finds out that he's married, and she's like, oh, does she know? What fucking woman can be with you? You're a monster. How could she love you knowing what you've done? I was a child. I was this. And it's really interesting. And I'm not saying you feel empathy for him, but you almost watch him say, what I did was wrong. I went to therapy for it. I shouldn't have done these things. And like they talk about the first time they're intimate together, he leaves to go get cigarettes or go to the bar and drink. She is left alone. He comes back because they're going to go run away together, and she's gone. And she thinks he left her and that he wasn't coming back. And he's like, I was coming back. You know, when I went to jail, I was sodomized to the point where I had to get a colonoscopy bag put in. Because we all know, we've heard what happens to individuals that sexually abuse children in jail.
Yep.
The movie did a great job of peeling back the pain that comes with statutory rape of a 13-year-old by an adult and what happens in the future to both. So he has changed his name, has a new life, because she's about 28. So you're looking at this being almost 15 years later. So he's married, has a whole new life, changed his name, and she is still dealing with this pain every day. And it kind of goes through the relationship that happens. Well, not really the relationship, it's only a day. But what happens with this confrontation of what happened in the past and now. And it really does a good job of exploring that statutory rape and how it stays with the victim for that period of time and how it stays with the victimizer as well. So It was a very, very interesting movie. Not horror at all, but a really honest look at it, and you can find that on Netflix.
Yeah, I may have to watch this one because that does sound like a very interesting take on this.
And it's not you don't actually see the sex scene. So, and you don't see them really kissing or anything like that as a child or anything, but they describe it, right? So it does make it a little bit more easier to watch in the sense that you're not having to watch this child have sex with a 43-year-old man. But it does allow that discussion of the aftermath of it to be very interesting. So, and then finally we have MFA, which I covered on Exploding Heads, so I won't go into too much detail on it. But Noelle is an introverted California fine arts graduate student, and she goes to a party, and she's lured up to his room, and this individual rapes her. And the rape scene is very difficult to sit through. It's there yet again, realistic to what rape could look like. And she does all the self-help things. She tries to report it. The school doesn't want to hear about it, which does happen. Schools cover up things all the time. I know people, when we watched Black Christmas, was like, oh no, the school would care and they would want to do more for the victim. I can tell you right now, schools cover up things.
Yeah.
Because they care about entrance and they care about admissions.
And they care about their their reputation.
Absolutely, right? So that's not far off. And, her first revenge is done accidentally. I don't know if you've seen the movie. You've seen the movie, right?
Yeah, I watched it.
Yeah, like she pushes the gentleman and he falls. Like it's not, she's not trying to kill him.
Right, she's just pushing him away.
Yeah, and he falls to his death and he dies and she escapes. And then as the movie goes on, the killings that she does becomes more and more intentional and more graphic.
Yep. And one thing I thought was interesting on this movie too was the scene where she goes to a former rape victim's house and talk to her and tries to get her to like be more open and talk about it, and she's just wanting to forget it and move past it because nothing was done because these boys had help from higher up powers that wanted to hide
Well, they were athletes.
Yes.
Right?
Yep, and I thought that was once again another hard to look at but truthful take on this because there is a lot of that goes on too.
And with all three of these movies, it talks about the victim and the victimizer, and the victimizer just going on and living their life.
Yeah.
Just going on. Oh, and then they try to say, well, my name was tarnished too, and I went through this. And in all cases, the victims are like, not what I went through, dude.
Right,
like,
exactly.
Oh, well, what you did was wrong. Like that's why you were labeled a pedophile, or that's why you were labeled a rapist, because that's what you did. So it's just really, really interesting how these movies, and in all three of them, there's revenge that's had. Una gets revenge as well because she eventually goes to this guy's house and tells his wife.
Oh, okay.
Right? So there is a revenge there. I would say that's probably a more realistic thing of what would happen because there's no violence.
Right.
It's just done with confrontation of, here's what you did to me. I'm going to make your life super uncomfortable. And she finds out he has a stepdaughter, which really pushes it over the edge.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
I can imagine.
And of course, he's saying, I would never do that to another girl. But, it's a very, very good film. But these three films really take not only the revenge piece into it, but also look at what is the true aftermath. And I credit these films for that. And I credit of how far we've come with dealing with sexual assault and women. Now, the key word there is women.
Yeah.
And I'm going to let you take over and talk about some of the things that you found about male assault.
Yep. So yeah, I wanted to cover, because there's not a lot of films that cover this in the way that we're talking. Like there's films like I'll bring up right now, Father's Day. I almost rewatched that because I like that movie, but it's pretty much just a rapist murderer. So there's no after effects for these victims. They're just killed afterwards. So just didn't fit with what we're going with here. So what I'm kind of covering is like men being raped by either women raping them or men raping them, and the cause and effect. I found an article that kind of covers a little bit of the male rape victims, and it was from irishtimes.com. And it's called That's Men. Male rape victims suffer mentally, physically, and silently. Historically, sexual crimes against males were considered impossible or at best rare. A legacy of that attitude can be seen in a 2005 study in the UK, which found that of 40 men who had been raped, only 5 reported the crime to the police. 4 of the 5 claimed the police were negative in their dealings with them. Only 1 complaint actually resulted in a conviction. So it's just going to show that right there, that not many men want to come out and say that they have been raped.
Mm-hmm.
And only 14 of these men out of these 40 sought medical help after the rape. And of these, only 5 disclosed that they had received their injuries in a course of rape. So once again, just showing that, yeah, this is something that they just don't want to bring up to authorities or anybody that would give them medical attention. They'd much rather deal with it on their own rather than let people know what happened to them. Most rape survivors do not receive testing for sexually transmitted diseases that they may have contracted during their rape because of this. And of the 40 men, 19 had attempted suicide after they were raped. So both men and women who are raped experience blaming of the victim by elements in society. But in the case of men, there is also a tendency to blame themselves because they failed to prevent the rape. Men also blame themselves for their psychological suffering after the rape because they believe they should have been strong enough to handle this.
Mm-hmm.
These imagined failures become a source of shame and make them even less likely to seek help for fear others will blame them or ridicule them. The shame derives from long-standing cultural attitudes to men about how they should be strong and able to fight off aggression and how they should be able to, quote-unquote, man up and get over violent incidents. In fact, those cultural attitudes are irrational. That doesn't stop the shame from feeling real and from keeping many men locked in a prison of isolation or worse, suffering from sexually transmitted diseases as a result of rape. This pretty, like, that was the article right there, but I kind of just wanted to say these men have, the ones that do get raped are afraid to come out about this. Like, they're, one film in particular that I will bring up right now, it kind of summed that up perfectly, is Vulgar from 2002, which this is a story about Will, who is a struggling professional clown determined to make a living performing at kids' parties. Downtrodden in every respect and picked on by everyone from the neighborhood juvenile delinquents to his own mother, Will reinvents himself as Vulgar, the transvestite clown, where he performs at bachelor parties. So basically his idea was, I'm not making money as a child performer, So I am going to go to bachelor parties and be hired on as a joke when they're looking for a stripper. I come out dressed in stripper's clothing, but a male clown. And unfortunately, on his very first night out as Vulgar, he ends up getting raped by 3 guys, and the whole situation ends up being videotaped.
God, this makes me so upset just you reading it.
Yeah. Like and it's very uncomfortable. And one thing that shocked me for this type of film was it was a View Askew film, which is Kevin Smith produced. So, the guy that does Mallrats and Chasing Amy and Silent Jane and Silent Bob did a film like this.
That doesn't really surprise me because I feel like even in those films, Kevin Smith tries to tackle issues.
Oh, he definitely does. I'm just surprised that this was something that they actually made into a movie. I didn't even know about it. But yeah, the reason I wanted to bring this up to tie to this is because, not only is it deal with the male rape, it deals with the after effects of this. Like, after this is all said and done, Will goes home like the next day and like just pretty much tries hurting himself, like smashes his mirror, grabs a chunk of the mirror and squeezes a chunk of the glass and just to cut himself.
Yep.
And then he just sits and like is suffering in silence in the bathtub and just like slowly just washing himself. And just like you can see that he's just trying to get clean. And all of a sudden his friend stops by and the friend finds out what's going on and he's going, well, did you go to the authorities? No. Did you go to the hospital at least? Like, you could have a sexual transmitted disease from this. No, I did not. Why didn't you do any of this? Because I don't want anyone to know what happened. And like that right there, when he said that statement, that like was very profound on like what a male rape victim would have going through their head. Something like this is something that, they've been completely emasculated and just shamed and humiliated to the point where like they can't confide into anybody about this. And that ends up kind of as the story goes on, like he's still processing it, but he ends up rescuing a kid from a hostage situation and becomes famous and like actually is starting to become well known for being a kids TV show clown host. And then these rapists find out about him becoming famous and they blackmail him saying, we want $50,000 or we're going to release this videotape of you pretending to like what we did to you. And then it brings back, like it pretty much like reopens that wound for him. And that's when the revenge ends up coming in play. And he actually just goes and takes matters in his own hand because obviously no one's going to believe him at this point because it's been a while. And like, who's going to believe someone that had that happen to him?
And he gets revenge violently, I assume.
Yes. Yep. It ends up being like pretty much by gun, but like not extreme violence, like along the lines of I Spy Night Grave, but more like realistic, like violence.
And that sounds like a realistic situation. And it's funny that I got more uncomfortable with you talking about that than I did with the female rape. And I think the reason is because we've been talking about female rape since 1960.
Yeah.
We have not been doing a good job in society as talking about male assault.
No, like it's...
Or rape or whatever you want to use.
And part of the issue too is it's joked about a lot.
It is. Like you look at the movie Horrible Bosses, and I know there's going to be people listening to this rolling their eyes at us, and that's fine. But whether we want to admit it or not, what Jennifer Anderson's character is doing to Charlie's character is not okay.
No.
She's trying to blackmail him and ruin his marriage. Like, or his upcoming marriage, right? So, and that's fine. You may listen to this and go, you know what, I banged that chick. And that's fine. That's cool. But that, just because you would, doesn't mean this other person wants that and wants their life ruined.
Yeah, because he did not want anything to do with her. He pushed her away multiple times. And if I remember correctly, didn't she end up gassing him and pretty much raping him?
Yeah, or framing something that something happened, because I don't think he was able, probably, certain things were not able to become aroused.
Right, that's true.
But she, made videos of her on top of him And it was a comedy, right? And if you find that funny, I'm not, I find it funny too. I watched the movie and I laughed. This is not about Scott and I judging anybody who found that funny. But what we're trying to expose here is that this is a topic that's not brought up. Yeah, and this brought it up in a way that was very effective.
Yeah, and like I was saying about, like, it's joked about a lot is this gets brought up in hundreds of movies. Mm-hmm. The whole, you're going to go to jail and someone's going to make you their bitch. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's just joked about or like a threaten. Mm-hmm. And so like but like the real repercussions of what happens doesn't get talked about very often.
Absolutely true.
And like I just found that film, like, because I'd watched it when I first like started watching like DVDs, so like back in like 2000 or something like that, I came across it, and I watched it and didn't think anything of it, like that had that type of impact. But then rewatching it for this and looking for these particular topics, man, this one hit home with me really hard. Like I just couldn't believe like some of the dialogue that was brought up into this felt so real.
And Kevin Smith is good at making real dialogue. He really is. And I'm really glad you shared this, because it was the first conversation we've had throughout this entire thing that made me uncomfortable. And that's important. You're not growing if you're not uncomfortable. And
right, exactly.
Even if this podcast today made you a little bit uncomfortable, I'm okay with it for the listeners, because it means that you're growing and it means that you're looking at things from a different perspective. And that's what we're trying to do here.
Yep, exactly. And like, I'm going to move on to another film that I had recently watched that covers like the situation kind of in Horrible Bosses in a way, except not used as a comedy.
Yeah.
So this one would be Like, Share, Follow, which came out in 2017. This one is about a YouTube star that, like in the age of YouTube, like these are stars. They get thousands to possibly millions of viewers. And there is one woman in particular that takes a liking to this guy to the point of stalking. That she ends up moving to the state he's in and pretending to be working as a mail lady. And once she gets his address and everything, she pretty much cons him into going on a first date. Because one of his rules was, I will never get involved with any one of my fans. He's like, I love all of you, but I'm not going to do that. That is not fair to anybody. Well, she's one of those fans that took it too far, tricked him, went on a date with him without him knowing who she really was, because there was no face to her, just her voice. And she sleeps with him. And after she sleeps with him, she confides into him that, oh yeah, I'm so-and-so. And he freaks out, naturally, and kicks her out of his house. And she just becomes more and more dangerous as a stalker, calling him constantly, messaging him constantly, following him places. And finally he's like, you know what, maybe I'll break this rule and I'll try this with her just to see where this goes, because she seems like a nice lady. Well, she ends up, when he tells her this, he's out doing something and he comes back. She's inside his house and in his bath waiting for him. So stalker level to the extreme, breaking into his house.
I'm going to pause for just a second. Let's reverse it. That was a female. That was a dude. They never would have got to that point.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
And I think it's funny that he decided to go on a date with her because she was so persistent. She was stalking and misled and lied to him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But he felt as a male, oh, she's being assertive and wants to be with me so badly, I should give her a chance.
Yep.
Like, talk about double standards for men, right?
Oh,
and,
it so is.
And that it's not fair for them.
Yeah. Yeah, and then, like, this is pretty much around the scene where she ends up drugging him and fucking him. Because, like, he freaks out and says, this is not okay. Like, when he finds her in the house and, like, basically tells her to get out of there. And then she's like, well, just, I'm sorry, let's go get a drink. And we'll talk about this like humans. Or like adults. And she drugs his drink. And when she drugs his drink, like, it wasn't enough to where, obviously, he couldn't get aroused. But he was still somewhat conscious, but not not there with his own mind, and she ends up videotaping it. And then she ends up sharing it on the interwebs after he pretty much finds out what she did. He kicks her out of the house. He calls the cops. Cops are just like, huh? This happened? Really? I don't buy it. We'll look into it just as a courtesy, but we don't buy this. And he's telling his friends like that he got raped, and his friends would just go, like, his guy friend was just like, dude, she's hot, good for you. And he's going, no, this is not cool. This is not real. And then they went online, and when everybody online seen it, all the dudes are like, yeah, good for you, way to get some, blah blah blah. And it just shows like that, yeah, there is that double standard where when a woman rapes a guy, especially a very attractive woman, like, the guy doesn't get believed or gets treated like, oh, well, you got laid by a hot chick. Oh, how horrible.
Right.
And that's not the case.
And we could have people listening to this podcast that's like, I'd be fine with that. And that is fine. That's okay that you would be fine with that. What we're talking about here is not everybody would be.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
You don't know what this woman has. She's now videotaped you. What if this guy was in another relationship, or he just said no? Men are allowed to say no too.
Right.
And I think that is what we're trying to get through for the layers here. That if the reverse had happened and that had been a female, the outcry would have happened early on.
Yep, and that guy would have been arrested.
Right, but because it was a female on male, it's the same way with abuse. I have witnessed with some of my fellow friends being with females that have slapped them, that have done shit to them that they shouldn't, physically or emotionally or verbally abuse them. And it's seen as, well, that's just girl power. Like, girls slap a guy and it's sometimes encouraged by other women and other people, but it's actually never okay to physically hit anybody.
No.
Like, I'm not talking about defending yourself. I'm talking about slapping a guy because you don't like what he said. That's actually not okay.
No, absolutely not.
Right? And or punishing someone emotionally because they won't do something that you want them to do. That's not okay either, male or female. And I think that's what this film is trying to get at.
Yeah, it is.
Right?
Like, it is a film that I think should be watched just so you can understand, like, a level that, like, through the male eye perspective, like, of this type of situation.
Well, or how we treat it in society. If a man, any male, heterosexual, homosexual, transgendered, whatever it may be, consent is consent.
Yeah.
And that's what these films are trying to present, is that consent is consent. It's not dependent on your sex or your sexual orientation.
Right, exactly. And, I mean, we were talking about it before we decided to record the show and if I was going to bring it up. But yes, I've been a victim of a sexual assault because of non-consent.
Yep.
I was not raped, but I very well could have been. Because, it was pretty much shortly after my divorce, I started going out on dates, trying to get myself back out there, trying to remember what it's like to be dating. Met this girl on a dating site. We went out for a few drinks. She invited me back to her place. And, one thing led to another. We were in bed. And then she was like, you know what? I know what guys like. And I'm going to do this. And she starts stabbing me with her fingers in pressure points around my groin. It hurt so bad that I screamed out loud. And she didn't stop. She kept doing it and kept doing it. And she actually got frustrated because I wasn't getting up.
You weren't becoming aroused from the behavior.
I wasn't getting aroused, and she was getting pissed. And so she ended up just rolling over and going to bed. When she passed out, I slowly got up, put my clothes on, got the hell out of there.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a few friends that I talked to about it. They're just like, sounds like a good time to me. It wasn't. It was a very unpleasant, uncomfortable experience that I don't wish upon anybody else. I mean, and it could have been a lot worse, but
it could have been. And the fact that, you're comfortable with telling that story, Scott, that takes a lot of courage, because you had something done to you that didn't feel right and that you didn't want. And, you know, if you were hanging out with a buddy and he was punching you on the shoulder and you were like, okay, man, that's enough. And he kept punching you and punching you, punching you to the point that it bruised you, you'd be like, what the fuck, dude? Like I said,
Right.
no, stop. Right? Why didn't you stop? And it doesn't make it okay that a female does that to you.
Right. And I was actually bruised in those spots where she pushed because she was pushing so hard.
You know, and I think that this is an area of horror, and horror has always been a advocate of social issues. Like we go back to The Last House on the Left and looking at feminism, right? And we tie that all together. By you sharing this story today and us looking at Vulgar and Like, Follow, Share, and probably we'll touch a little bit on Knock Knock, and I'll talk a little bit about, you know, the slasher season, though you've already done such a good job of describing it. Basically, the slasher TV show was a TV show on Netflix. It was a Canadian show, and the second season, main character named Noah is raped anally by one of the characters, and the aftermath of it is painful to watch because he is bleeding from his anus profusely. He is crying uncontrollably. He is in a shower, unable to get out. The one character is trying to clean him, and it is painful to watch. You know, and it's exposing he has been violated in a way that is not okay for anybody to be violated.
Right.
Not okay, but I applaud them for using a man, because I think that this is still a subject area where we have your I Spit on Your Grave and MFA and Una and Women Fighting Back and Here's the Therapy and stuff like that. And then we have situations like this in your story. Like, what if this individual has done stuff like that to other people? Or what if, you know, Like, Share, Follow, that probably happens. Or women that are abusive towards men. Like, we're not talking about it. And I think these horror films are beginning to talk about it. They're far and few in between, but we're at least getting there, and that's what's so great about horror. It's about moving things forward in society and not being afraid to take on the big issues.
Yeah, because horror does tackle a lot of taboo subjects, and that is one thing that makes me proud to be a horror genre fan, because they do cover these topics in some ways that people would not expect if they just looked at it as a like simple horror film. But when you dig down deep, you see a lot of these layers of storytelling and bringing forth real topics that are happening in society.
Absolutely.
Okay, so yeah, I'm going to talk about Knock Knock, which is believe a remake of a movie called Death Games, which I did not get a chance to see before we recorded. But this is stars Keanu Reeves, who is a father that is a father and a loving husband. His wife and his kids have to leave for Father's Day week, or are going on vacation for Father's Day weekend, and their gift to him was pretty much, you know, here's the house to yourself, get your work done that you need to get done, because he's an architect, and we'll give you the time and space to do that, and we'll be home in a couple days. And while he's at home working by himself, it's just downpouring, and he gets a knock on the door late at night, and it's these two beautiful young women drenched from head to toe, and they say, like, you know, their car broke down. Could we happen to use your phone, or can we use your website to get an Uber or your internet? So being the nice guy he is, he allows them in, lets them dry off, brings them a towel, gets them a hot cup of coffee, and he calls them an Uber. Well, they're constantly talking like sexual things and just like being somewhat flirtatious with him, and you can tell he's awkward and he's moving away, and just like, because they'll come and sit right next to him and kind of sandwich him in, and he'll get up and move to another chair and just sit down and just like be polite and talk with them. And then they're like, all right, well, do you mind if we use your shower? Because before the Uber gets here, he's like, no, go ahead. And he stays down, and they're getting the shower, and he gets the notification the Uber arrives. So he calls up for them. 15 minutes go by, and still nothing. So he goes up and knocks on the door, bringing them towels just in case they need them. And they said, oh, we're fine, come on in. And he opens the door, and they're both butt naked. And instantly both latch onto him, trying to like seduce him and make out with them. And he's like pushing them away, like, no, I can't do this. And he's like, your ride is here. Here's your clothes. Get dressed. And they keep pulling him in. And unbuckling his pants, and then he just kind of gives in to them. And then he wakes up the next day realizing what he did, completely defeated, and then the women act even wilder and start becoming obnoxious and like destroying stuff in the house. And then they tie him up and pretty much say, "You're gonna fuck my friend right here, or we are going to call your wife while you're tied up and FaceTime her with us naked, or with us in scantily clad clothes, with you naked right next to us." And so he ends up giving in and ends up fucking her friend. And he gets videotaped, and it ends up getting posted to Facebook at the end of the movie, and ruining his life and his career. Which, yeah, this one doesn't have like a lot of the aftermath effects because it pretty much stops right there once the video gets shared. But you can imagine like what would happen after all this was said and done, because he's left alive, but now his life is destroyed because family and friends have seen what has gone on in the
By
video.
sexual predators, because that's predation, right? Like, that's what that is.
Yeah, so I thought that would be it was kind of a fitting one to bring into this topic as well, just because it kind of covers that, and it shows like even when a guy says no over and over and over again, like sometimes like that pressure is there that he ends up just kind of giving in.
Absolutely. And I think the thing can be things said for women. Women may say no, 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 and then the guy, oh, come on, or you know, woman to woman, man to man, and then things happen. Now, we didn't go into the LGBTQ community, or we as much. There is a film, Knife Plus Heart, that does cover that a little bit. We also didn't talk about Hard Candy as well.
Oh yeah, and there was another one that dealt with like incestual rape, and that would be Strange Things About the Johnsons that Ari Aster did a short film on.
Absolutely, and also The Shrewd's Nest, you can argue as well, is another one that explores that. There's a lot of movies that explore it, and we particularly chose these films only because we don't want to have a 5-hour podcast, and they were the ones that made the most sense for us for this topic, and that we felt the most comfortable talking about and referring to. So I think really, you know, thanks for coming on the ride with us. We know it wasn't an easy listen. But if anything, I think what we can take from this is the power that horror and movies can have to explore issues and to educate us and to promote. And as we saw with the argument about horror bringing around this new sense of feminism, I think we can see the same thing happen for all communities and all sexual orientations and everybody, of learning about the truth of consent and what is okay and not okay, and really no longer blaming the victim, whoever the victim may be. And horror does a good job of either that victim coming back and kicking ass and taking names, but also is moving forward to talk about the aftermath of it. So, you know, really some big props to, yet again, the podcasters in the community that have covered these films before, and the horror filmmakers in general. Who knows where we will go with this genre as it continues. We'll always get some cool kick-ass kills in these films. We'll always get some great gore. We'll get that, you know, awesome protagonists that we love, and those fucking awkward scenes that we got to sit through, and uncomfortable scenes. But who knows where horror will educate us from here. So, you know, I look forward to seeing how we can continue to build advocacy for the victim through horror. Yeah,
because the more this stuff gets talked about, the more horror will talk about it in its own way and bring it more to the forefront. Because it does seem to be one of the leading reasons for a lot of stuff getting brought to the forefront, at least in cinema.
Absolutely. So yeah, so we'll finish this off on a lighter note.
Yeah. So thank you all very much for sitting through this with us. This was a tough subject to cover, but I'm glad that we did. It was something that should be discussed, and like having a male-female perspective point of view on it probably is a different take. So hopefully you all appreciate what we did. So we're going to talk about our Out of the Dark segment, which is a topic that a new segment of ours that we are going to cover some type of horror news or horror related topic. And the topic we wanted to bring to the table today was the Horrorhound convention. It was it's been a convention for quite a few years. I think there was one in Indiana and Cincinnati and another place. And they usually end up doing them like one in each city, like once every couple of years, or once or twice a year. However, thanks to COVID, they've had to push it back, and now they've had to cancel it just because they can't afford to keep doing this. So what they ended up doing was they ended up creating a digital film festival where you are able to pay $15 for one-time payment of $15 to watch all the different short film and full-length feature films that were entered into their film festival that you would see at their convention. And it started on Wednesday at like 6 p.m. to midnight, and went on to Thursday. It's going on Friday night, Saturday night, and ends on Sunday. So you got like 30 hours or so of new short films and full-length films that no one's gotten a chance to see yet, and all you got to do is pay $15 and watch the stream live. And so far, we are recording on Friday, so it's only been 2 days of the convention or the film festival going on. I got to catch a good chunk of the Wednesday night one. Did you get to catch much, Heather?
Not on Wednesday, no. I watched Thursday. I saw a couple short films on Wednesday, and then some stuff on Thursday.
Okay. And what did you think?
You know what? I think that it's really exciting to see films like this being made, because it really shows, some of them are obviously very low budget, which is fine. It's a film festival. But I almost feel like I'm getting a sneak peek into the behind the scenes. And watching the film festival films now, being someone that's watched more movies, I have a lot more appreciation for the work, the time, the energy that goes into creating these films. You're going to see a lot of films that are really good, and you're going to see films that maybe aren't your cup of tea or just not as well made as you thought they could be. But it really exposes to what could be coming, and oh my God, what an opportunity. Where else would you find something like this for $15 to have access to films from all over the world? And these are films that, we could be raving about next year.
Right, or a couple of years from now, because some of these films, like some of the films at festivals, don't make it out for a couple of years till they find distribution.
Right? To me, it's like getting a seat on something special. And $15 is nothing to pay for all of the access that you get. And there's a chat room too, so you can chat with people about the films as you're watching them.
Yeah, and hell, I paid $15 and I've watched one full-length film and like 3 short films. And right there, that was worth the money. Like, if I stopped now, I would not be disappointed that I spent $15.
And we'll be watching it Sunday. We'll be sitting down and watching a lot of the film festival together on Sunday. Because Sunday, Scott and I usually watch new movies anyway, but we'll be watching the film festival, obviously. And that will be worth it alone.
Right.
Like, it's just it's a gift. Like, there's a couple of things about 2020. People keep shitting on 2020. And I get it. Okay, COVID sucks. We all know COVID sucks, all right? We all are fucking aware of the fact that there's a virus that sucks. But there has been so many blessings that have come out of this. I see more people outside being physically active to start off with. I've seen a stronger online community develop. We've had more VOD releases. I've been watching more VODs that I probably never would have watched otherwise.
Right.
And we have something like this. Like, I'm excited for this.
Yeah, because this has gotten certain companies and events to think outside the box. And what an amazing opportunity for these independent filmmakers to not only just have the people that would be at the convention see their films, but with this, it's given almost the whole entire world an option to see their films. Because now you don't have to go just to the convention to see their movies. You can watch them from the comfort of your home.
Like me, all the way in little old Canada, I'm able now to watch a film festival that would be in the United States that I would have to cross the border, transfer my money into American, find somewhere to stay.
Yeah.
Like, it is not easy for Canadians to go to the States. Our dollar is worth significantly less. And even going to see Scott is a budget for me. And I stay with him and he feeds me. And I still have to factor gas and time. And, we do go out and see movies or the conventions and stuff like that. And my dollar sucks. I still have bills to pay. Like, nothing's changed. It's just my dollar blows compared to the American dollar. So I think something like this, and you can buy a Funko Pop for $15, or you can get a 5-day film festival. Like, it's a no-brainer to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And and what I want to discuss is would you like to see this going forward with other conventions?
Well, I don't know. What do you think?
Obviously we want to see this going forward.
Yeah, I'm just teasing you.
Do you think that others will take notice of this and go forward?
I think it depends how much money this makes. I think COVID-19 or this virus, at first I thought this was just going to be another virus like SARS and swine flu and everything. And I don't think that anymore. I think this virus isn't what's going to change. It's our activities that are going to change.
Yeah.
Physical distancing and the changes that are being implemented in businesses and social events, it's going to make it harder for larger groups to gather.
Yeah.
And I think that these online methods of getting lots of people to watch it, and also for distribution's sake, what if I'm a film company up here in Canada, and I watch a film, and I'm like, oh shit, I'll pick that up.
All these guys, yeah.
Right? Like, why would you not want that exposure? It's a win for horror fans because we get to see what's coming down the pipe. It's a win for the filmmakers. It's a win for the festival because it puts your festival on the map. So, if you're part of a convention and the festival is there, and I see this festival, and I go and I look at your convention, I go, oh shit, that looks really good. Maybe I end up going to your convention. Yet again, it's how I feel about horror movies. It's not like we need less people watching horror.
Right.
This makes things more accessible for people. And in our community, our little horror community alone, at least 4 of us, or 5 of us, have purchased tickets for this festival.
Yep. And when you're watching the stream, you can see how many people are watching up in the corner. At one point during that full-length feature, we were up to 120 people. Now calculate that into $15 a ticket. That's almost $2,000.
Yep. And that doesn't count who wasn't watching who bought a ticket.
Right, exactly. And that doesn't count Canadian dollars for you, because I know it was almost double the price.
Yeah, I'll get it on my credit card statement soon enough, but it will probably be close to 30.
Yeah, so different countries, how much people are spending on this, but yeah, just I bet you with the weekend, Memorial Day weekend, there'll probably be way more viewers even.
It's so smart, and I don't see any downfall with it. I see zero negativity. All I see is positivity. And I think we need to start being more positive. Dave C. made a really good point on exploding heads a couple weeks ago. Yet again, we blow exploding heads. But he said something like, everyone just bitches about COVID. And you know what? It's true. COVID fucking sucks, okay? We all get it, all right? Yeah. Shit's been canceled. We all fucking get it. But here is something that's great. Here is something that is a real opportunity. So let's celebrate it. And, if you don't want to do it or not, that's fine. I haven't heard anyone shit on it or anything like that. But this is a positive thing that's come out of it. So let's celebrate that.
Yes, this was a way for a convention to get creative and bring attention to them and hopefully help cover some of the cost of everything that's happened.
Absolutely.
And then once again, what a wonderful, wonderful thing for these little independent filmmakers, to have so many people watch their movies that may not have seen them normally. It's just all around, it's, I think, a excellent idea that I think other horror cons should consider doing.
I agree with you 100%. And I think we'll start to see that. I'm wondering if TIFF will go online, the Toronto International Film Festival.
Yeah.
It would be interesting if it does, because, man, I'll pay. That'll be in Canadian, so I'll be even happier. But, I'll pay whatever it is for sure. It's exciting times.
Yeah, because there was also South by Southwest. I think they released 20 of their films on Amazon. And you had to pay a certain amount for it, but I think that was kind of the start of it, where we're starting to see festivals kind of take this route.
Yeah, looking outside the box, right? That's what it's going to come down to.
Yep, I'll say during these stressful times, this forces people and companies to get creative, and we'll probably see a lot of these changes like stay.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, we just wanted to kind of bring that up. Like, unfortunately, by the time you guys hear this episode, the Horrorhound Weekend Film Festival will be probably over with. But, hopefully some of you had got a chance to, like, see it. I posted the link on our Facebook page, so hopefully some of you took advantage of that as well. So, yeah, this is just something that I thought was really cool that we should talk about.
So thanks for bringing it up, Scott, and we'll probably lead to the closing of our episode now. I don't know what our next topic's going to be. I'm probably going to make Scott pick it. So whatever Scott decides is what we're going to talk about next. So we'll see. We'll see what Mr. Crawford decides that he wants to do for our next topic. But in the meantime, take care of yourselves. Please see our links and stuff below. And as always, unpleasant dreams.